Hello, everyone. John the Bond here. This is the third impromptu chat that I've managed to put together with Matrix Decode. And the basic idea of these is that Matrix and I like to chat on Skype about different things. And then sometimes we think, you know what, why don't we just go on the air and have the chat there? And if anybody wants to listen, they can listen. If they want to listen live, there's a live chat function there. But these are the kind of things that we talk about on Skype. And I'm, of course, joined by Matrix. Matrix, how are things over there in Spain?
Hey John, yeah, good man. Just it's 11:30 in the morning here, just getting into the day. It's warming up. The weather's been really hot lately. I mean, temperatures are in around the 40 degrees centigrade during the day. It's pretty hot stuff here. But yeah, looking forward to having another informal chat.
Yeah, well, I got home from work and I had a quick shower, and then I saw you on Skype and I thought, oh, I want to get your thoughts on a couple of things. We started talking about gravity and we thought, hey, why not just book in another impromptu chat? So I've got some dinner ready. If people can hear me in the background, making some noise, that's just because I'm having my dinner. But this isn't an official show. This isn't a formal show. This is just basically the kind of thing that Matrix and I would talk about off the air. But we thought, let's talk about it on the air, and hopefully you can get something out of it. And if you're in the live chat, feel free to throw us some questions, and we'll see if we can get to them. But there are a few topics in particular, Matrix, that we wanted to talk about. The New Horizon passage of Pluto. There is a satellite, I guess you can call it, or a space exploration probe or mission, whatever you want to call these devices they claim are out there. There's one that's going to pass Pluto tonight, Australian time. So I wanted to talk about that. Also, the moon laser reflection, because, and a lot of people don't like a lot of people who believe the official story don't even know what the official story is. But the official story is there's these reflectors on the moon that you can shoot a laser at and supposedly get the reflection back and prove that there's reflectors on the moon, which proves that we went to the moon. I've been looking into that one further, and I can't believe how silly that story is. So we're going to talk about that. Then gravity, Matrix. I know that you've been thinking a lot about gravity and some of the problems, with the whole heliocentric model and gravity. And then if we get time, also scientific fairy tales, which we did touch on in the last impromptu chat, the Big Bang Theory, dinosaurs, human evolution. Hopefully we get time to talk about those briefly. So it might be a 1 hour show, it might be 2 hours, no more than that, because I've got other things that I need to do tonight, and you've got things that you need to do today, Matrix, but hopefully we can spend an hour or two just having a chat. How's that sound?
Yeah, cool man.
Good. Well, firstly, let me get the screen share function going nice and early. I wanted to talk about something that I saw. I was at work today. I had a bit of time just to quickly check the net, and I saw this article. I wasn't expecting it, and I had a bit of a laugh, so hopefully you can see this as well. Is that coming through on your side?
Yeah.
So this is an article from The Australian, and that's obviously the Rupert Murdoch paper here in Australia. It's the major paper that's sold, in every state. It's actually not that popular. I think it only has 40,000, 60,000 readers a day, but it's the flagship broadsheet. They lose money every year, but Murdoch is happy to lose money because of the influence that it has on the political agenda, or whatever the case may be. Anyway, this is an AP article that they've republished, and I read this at work. It was published today, July 14, and it's entitled "Pluto Bigger Than Scientists Thought as New Horizons Flyby Looms." I'll play this video in a minute, but just quickly, little Pluto is a little bigger than anyone imagined. On the eve of NASA's historic flyby of Pluto, scientists announced overnight that the New Horizons spacecraft has nailed the size of the faraway icy world. Measurements by the spacecraft, set to sweep past Pluto tonight, Australian time, indicate the diameter of the dwarf planet is 50 miles bigger than previous estimates in the low range. Principal scientist Alan Stern said this means Pluto has a lower density than thought, which could mean an icier and less rocky interior. And it just goes on like that. And if I remember, I'll post a link to this article below. But let's take a look at this video, and let's see if we notice anything that it has in common with other videos from NASA. That's if it loads, by the way. We'll see if it loads. While we're waiting, we'll have a look at this photo, Matrix. What do you make of this one? I'll see if I can go to view image. No, that's the full resolution. Hold on, we'll go back to where we were. Yeah, here we are. Yeah, I mean, what do you make of this? I mean, that's clear CGI. They even admit it. An impression of New Horizons approaching Pluto and its largest moon, Chiron. An obvious CGI fakery, although the planet, the so-called planet, actually looks very similar to what we're supposed to believe is Earth. You know what I mean? Which just makes the whole, photos of Earth thing look more ridiculous. Then these are the images that New Horizons spacecraft, they call it, is supposedly sending back. This is it. This is actually supposed to be images from a spacecraft passing Pluto. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Anyway, it goes on, blah, blah, blah. Here's the best part. In the final paragraph, an extension of the US $720 million mission, not yet approved, could have New Horizons flying past another, much smaller Kuiper belt object before departing the solar system, end quote. So there you have it, $720 million, and this is what is passed off as a result of the mission. You've got to be kidding me, Matrix. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, more NASA CGI, and fantastic photos we're seeing of Pluto there. I mean, worth every penny. I mean, it's just so valuable what they're doing, NASA, I think. It's just strange, isn't it? I mean, why can't they show us? They can show us, great detailed pictures of galaxies, trillions of miles away, but they can't show us a picture of a good picture of Pluto, a good picture of Saturn or any of the planets really. That don't seem CGI enhanced or completely fabricated. I mean, the Pluto pictures are just stunningly, amazingly, incredibly, unbelievably rubbish. I mean, I can't believe that's what they're passing off as a scientific endeavour these days. Yeah, it's just absurd.
It's really incredible, and today I'm not having a few beers. I'm just sitting at home having my dinner, and really, it's hard to be serious about this. It's so ridiculous. It really is ridiculous for me to even sit there and try and read out their story in a normal voice. It's not doing it justice. You really have to try and be a bit zany to try, how can you be serious when this is what's being passed off as real? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, you could maybe put up some of the images of Pluto, Pluto images, Hubble images, the various images they've got on screen, and it's laughable. It could be anything. It could be, Matt from the NASA channel. Each points out how they could, are they planets or are they drawings? Are they photographs or are they paintings? And he's absolutely right. I mean, they seem terrible CGI versions. Really bad. I mean, the image you just showed just now in the article, you've got the picture of the spacecraft. I like to use that word a lot. And it's some kind of a collage, and it just looks ridiculous. And that's all they have. I mean, I
found a video, Matrix. I'll screen share it in a moment. Just quickly, we've already got a few people watching us live right now. Again, this was just impromptu. We didn't have any time to promote it. So thanks to everyone for seeing that we were live and joining us. We've got a few people. Watcher1421, Matty V Phuket from Thailand, We're Awake Soul, The Rock Nose, Stuart Jones. Stuart Jones, where's he from? Can't remember. But anyway, there we go. He's from the UK as well. So we've got a whole bunch of people in watching live. Thanks everyone for joining us. Feel free to throw your questions at us. Let me just go. I couldn't get the Australian article to load the video. So what I'll do is I'll see if I can screen share this other one that I found. It's from Sky News, so it's probably the same video. I mean, Sky is obviously partly owned by Murdoch, and
it says scientists are re-evaluating the dwarf planet Pluto.
Are you seeing that one? I'll just go to present to everyone. Hold on a second. All right.
Yeah, I'm seeing it. Yeah.
From the New Horizons space probe offer fresh evidence about Pluto's size, geography, and the possibility it has an ice cap. The spacecraft NASA says scientists are re-evaluating the dwarf planet Pluto as new images.
That's not my computer pixelating that. That's actually what they're trying to show as being Pluto. I mean, are you kidding me?
NASA says scientists are re-evaluating the dwarf planet Pluto as new images from the New Horizons space probe offer. NASA says scientists are re-evaluating the dwarf planet Pluto as new images.
Re-evaluating the dwarf planet Pluto? These guys should be re-evaluating their lives. Look at this.
I actually can't see the video. I can only hear the audio.
Evaluating the dwarf planet Pluto.
Are you not seeing that on the screen share?
I am now. Yeah.
So if I go full screen, you can't see it. Is that what happens?
Maybe.
Let me just double check the other. Oh no, that's not what I wanted. Where are we? Okay, I'll just leave it on the small window. Check this out.
NASA says scientists are re-evaluating the dwarf planet Pluto
Jesus.
as new images from the New Horizons space probe offer fresh evidence about Pluto's size, geography, and the possibility it has an ice cap. The spacecraft has given NASA the most precise measurement of Pluto so far.
This has given NASA the most precise measurement of Pluto so far. Now, Pluto is supposed to be in our solar system. And think about this. We're supposed to believe NASA when they tell us the stars are millions of light years away. So the distance that light would travel in a year, millions of those. We're supposed to believe them. But they can't even tell us they can't even know the size of Pluto.
As well as images and data on 3 of its 5 moons. NASA says Pluto is 25 kilometres larger in diameter than previously measured from Earth, and at least 2,326 kilometres is the largest of the planets in the belt on the far outskirts of the solar system.
This newsreader sounds like she's struggling to get through this without laughing. I reckon she knows. Listen to this.
25 kilometres larger in diameter than previously measured from Earth, and at least 2,326 kilometres is the largest of the planets in the belt on the far outskirts of the solar system.
She's thinking to herself, I didn't get into this to tell fairy tales about space. I got into this job to talk about kids dying in home fires and taxes that are needed to be passed because we're in a deficit. You know what I mean? Not for this. This is C-grade propaganda. I'm a B-grade propagandist. Listen to this.
Previously measured from Earth, and at least 2,000.
Look, this is clear. Like, they're not even pretending that this is real, but all of the footage they give is CGI.
326.
What's this? This is just
kilometres
ridiculous.
is the largest of the planets in the belt on the far outskirts of the solar system. New Horizons will.
I mean, there are people. I mean, remember how we had Rory Cooper of My Perspective on our show a couple of weeks ago, Matrix, on the Ball Their Skeptic Roundtable? The kind of stuff that he does on his computer is, to me, more impressive than this. You know, like NASA don't even have to spend much money on good CGI. They can just give us like really shitty CGI, and that's good enough for people. So long as you've got this woman saying that it's from NASA, she says, "Well, NASA says," and that it's NASA. You know.
NASA says scientists are
NASA says scientists are reevaluating. It's just incredible.
Over the next 3 days.
Yeah, whatever. All right. So what do you make of that, Matrix?
Yeah, the men in white coats, you know, the priesthood of science, they're telling you how it is, so you can trust them. You know, that's obviously all real, and a worthy cause. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Pluto used to be known as a planet, regarded as one of the planets, but they downgraded it a few years ago to a dwarf planet, and so a lot keeps happening with Pluto. They keep, with this report, they seem to be changing. It's suddenly got bigger again, and it's hard to make heads or tails of it. Really, it's just pure propaganda. I mean, at its finest.
Well, I'll tell you what. Here's an idea, because here's the thing: we do the Baller Skeptic Roundtable, we come prepared, and we try and put together a somewhat professional-sounding show. I do the same thing with ARP. And then Sunday sessions is just freewheeling, whatever. With these kinds of impromptu chats, you and I can just sort of do research on the fly if we like. Right now, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to see if I can do some maths and look at the distance from Earth to Pluto, work out how off like, let's just pretend this story is real, right, for a moment, that they actually sent this spaceship out to Pluto and it discovered the size of Pluto. Let's just use their silly story and pretend it's real for a moment, and then work out their margin of error, and then apply that to the stars. How's that sound? What do you reckon of that? Pluto.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, cool.
Let's find out. And here's the thing: this New Horizon spaceship, I had no idea it even existed until today. You know, and normally, up until recently, because I like to check the mainstream news regularly just to see what crap is in the news, right? And I used to just ignore all the space stuff because I've never been interested. Now I'm interested because I know it's all crap. So I saw this thing talking about New Horizon passing Pluto, and I was like, oh, this is going to be good. And, yeah, that was the article that you guys saw before. So let's have a look. Let's see what's it got. Sorry, I'm not screen sharing my little thing here. So for those who are wondering, I'm at the Pluto Wikipedia page. Let's see. What distance do they think it is? While I'm trying to do some maths here, Matrix, do you want to just sort of wax lyrical about anything to do with all of this?
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I'd just like to say to people in the chat, I can't reply to you in the chat because I'm signed in under a different account here, my Ben account. So just want to say hi to everyone in the chat who's saying hi. Yeah, this, you know, I mean, NASA. I mean, it's NASA science. I mean, it's everything they put out. It seems to be really bad CGI. I mean, when it comes to these planets and the missions into space, you know, the Orion mission that they're talking about, and you know, we discussed the Voyager probes the other day on Sunday sessions, and you know, today we were looking at New Horizon because you know you mentioned it to me, and Pluto. I mean, what's really going on? They seem to be clueless about the our solar system, you know, and the planets within them. I mean, for them to be changing, you know, downgrading Pluto from a planet to a dwarf planet, and then talking about it's actually much bigger than they thought, and you know, and now they're trying to bring in the whole, it might possibly have an ice cap. You know, it's trying to suggest that other planets have water like the Earth, you know, which they don't. You know, they're trying to make out. You know, people like to say, well, you look up into space and you know, you see a sphere there, so that the Earth is a sphere. Well, we're not seeing spheres or planets, so to speak, with water all over them. We're seeing them supposedly dried out, they've lost all the water, and so on. And they're either that or they're a gaseous planet, and so on. And you know, people like to make that connection. But so when they mention things like, oh, there may be an ice cap, you know, well, why are they speculating, saying things like that? Either they can see it or they can't. You know, and the quality of the imagery. I mean, it's like they're shooting that picture of Pluto from Earth. I mean, the poor resolution of it. I mean, it's extremely pixelated. When I saw that, it must have been a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, and they put out an article about new photos of new images of Pluto. I mean, it was just really heavily pixelated. I mean, you couldn't almost get any more pixelated than the image they shown us, and it just boggles the mind that you know, that people can buy into this, and you know, use, you know, the way that you can just see from what they're doing with this one, you know, story about Pluto and the New Horizon, which is an interesting use of a name. You know, you can extrapolate or backwards and you know, start to question everything else. I mean, if that's as far as they've got, and you know, with this New Horizon probe, you have to wonder what else is going on with NASA, you know, and what they're trying to, what claims they're making, and I mean, every image I've seen so far from NASA of the planets looks like CGI enhanced. The photos of Saturn, it's just pure CGI. It's really bad CGI. There's no real depth to the objects, and it just doesn't look real at all. None of it. And yeah.
All right. Well, I've done some quick maths, and apparently from Pluto to Earth is the average distance is 4.7 billion kilometers, which is about 40.7 AU, which is the distance from the Earth to the Sun, right? So it's just say 41, round it up to 41. From the Earth to the nearest star, which is supposedly Proxima Centauri, it's 271,000 AU. So that's about 6,600 times further away. So the nearest star is 6,000, according to the official figures, 6,600 times further away than Pluto. Now, let's go back to that silly story. Where were we? Just pretending it's real for a moment. I can't click off this calculator. What's going on here? I just minimized there. Now, going back to this silly story, they're saying that they've worked out that it's 80 kilometers bigger than previous estimates in the low range, right? Now, let's just go with that story. 80 kilometers, going back to my little calculator here, times by 80, 532,000. Hold on, I've got to fix up my maths here. Matrix, you keep on talking away. Just let me write down a bit more math so I can better articulate myself here. What I'm trying to do is to determine, even on their own story, how far off their estimates would be of the stars. So just bear with me. I'll work that out and I'll go back to you.
Okay. I mean, yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say about it.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. I've worked it out now. So, use the margin of error of 80 kilometers and times that by the distance between Pluto, like apply the same margin of error from Earth to Pluto, but apply it across Earth to the nearest star, and you're looking at 530,000 kilometers. 530,000 kilometers is how far off they could be in terms of the size of an object, just based on their own admissions of how inaccurate they were about Pluto. Let me put that a bit better. Suppose that this story about the thing going to Pluto and finding out what size it really is, and that the measurements for Earth from wrong, and just applying the basic figures that they've given us, and then extrapolating across to the nearest star in our supposed galaxy, they would be off by more than 500,000 kilometers. Now, 500,000 kilometers might not seem like much if you believe in light years and all the other nonsense they teach you, but just base it on your own experience in your own life. Think about how great 530,000 kilometers is. And again, that's simply taking their figures from that article and then extrapolating it to the nearest star. I don't even know how far away the furthest away star is supposed to be. Do you?
No, I don't. It's trillions of miles away. I mean, if I'm not wrong. I mean, yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Even their own story, you'd have to be a fool to believe it. Like, without even pointing out that the story is laughably false, even their own story, you'd have to say, hold on a second. If you were that wrong on something so close, but we're supposed to believe you about everything else that's so far away.
Yeah, well, I thought they'd figured it all out, hundreds of years ago, the solar system, and yeah, at least since NASA's been around, they've been telling us for like 50 years plus about the solar system, and I thought they'd figured it all out, but they don't even know what's in our own solar system.
This is just incredible stuff. Look at I'm reading here at scienceline.ucsb.edu. So UCSB, what's that? University of California, Santa Barbara, UCSB. Which is what? Isn't that where Elliot Rodger went as well? I'm pretty sure it is. I'll double check that. But anyway, this is a seemingly legitimate website. They're trying to tell me now that the closest stars to Earth are 4 light years away. There are several that are less than 20 light years away, but our galaxy is 80,000 light years wide. But these turkeys couldn't even tell us how big Pluto was. And we're supposed to trust them on, I mean, it's just...
Yeah, they're really good at measuring the galaxy and the universe. They're really good at those things. They can tell you how far it is, how far it's moving, how much it's expanding, and so on. But they can't go this way. I mean, apparently Pluto was discovered in 1930 and was originally considered the 9th planet from the Sun. But after 1992, its status as a planet fell into question following the discovery of the Kuiper Belt, a ring of objects beyond Neptune that includes Pluto among other large bodies. And yeah, I'm just reading from Wikipedia there. So, Pluto's only been around apparently since 1930. And, I'm not sure how they discovered it then, because, I'm not sure what technology they had in 1930 to be able to see Pluto. Because, in 2015, with the super advanced, amazing science technology that we have nowadays, all we can get is a blurry, pixelated image.
Yeah, it's just, oh man. Here's the thing. I think a lot of people, the vast majority of us, I mean, this is going back a few months ago before all of this, baller skepticism thing picked up. We just went along with the official story, but how many of us actually know it? How many of us have sat down and read, like I just read, that according to science, our galaxy is 80,000 light years wide? How many of us actually sat down and thought about, hold on a second, 80,000 light, I mean, you can just make any number up. What the hell, how is anyone supposed to debunk it? You know what I mean? You can say anything. 80,000 light years. I'm just, I don't know. I'm not really articulating myself.
That figure will probably change, when they make a new discovery.
Well, look, I haven't looked into this far enough, Matrix, but my understanding is one of the reasons why they had to invent light years in the first place was because people pointed out, hold on, if we can travel 190,000 miles around the sun, or whatever, was it 190 million miles around the sun? Oh, yeah, that's right. If we can travel 190 million miles around the sun, shouldn't we see a change in the parallax of the stars? As in, the ones that are closest to us should seem like they've changed relative to the ones that are furthest away from us in the sky, because we've traveled so far. Same as in a car, the trees that are closest to you seem to be moving faster than the trees that are further away. So people were saying, hold on, if we're traveling so far around the sun, how come we can't see a change in the parallax? And then the so-called scientists said, oh, well, actually, that's because the stars are so far away. They're 80,000. I mean, it's just, this is almost more ridiculous than religion. You know what I mean? Like the people say, oh, how can you believe in religion? How can you believe that somebody parted the sea or something? And I'm like, you know what? You're right. I don't believe that someone parted the sea. It seems ridiculous to me. But this stuff isn't even, you can't even use your own common sense to try and prove them wrong. They're just numbers. They're just made up numbers that are based, what are they based on?
Yeah, it is science fiction, and they like to term these, some of these forces, the fictitious force. I mean, I think I was looking at it the other day with, and discussing it with the event skeptic. We were looking into some of the definitions of gravity and related issues, and they just seem to be making it up. I mean, as they go along to fit their model and narrative and keep things going, advancing science, and a lot of it's approximation, assumption. All of it is theory. I mean, from the Big Bang to evolution, gravity, they're all just theories. They're not proven facts, and people think that they are. In schools these days they're teaching it as fact, and these are just the wildest theories. And we're getting to discussing evolution and the Big Bang a bit later on, but you can see how they're trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, and they're doing a really good job of it. I mean, it's a surprisingly good job considering the information they put out and the quality of the images and videos and so on.
Well, you know what a lot of people will say, Matrix? They'll say, oh, but Jono, here's the problem. Our minds aren't big enough to understand these numbers. So when you talk about all these big numbers, you're just trying to confuse people because the human mind can't grasp these numbers. And I say, how is that any different to one of the religious people trying to explain God and how our minds aren't sophisticated enough to understand it? I mean, the further you look into the official story of what we call science, the more you can see that there are direct parallels to what we call religion. It is religious.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a faith. It's based on faith. You know, most people aren't scientists, so they just take the word of these high priests of science, and they have to have faith in these people. And it really is just a belief system. And, you know, science itself is just full of these dogmatic beliefs. You're not allowed to question them, or otherwise you will lose your funding, you will be expelled from the science community, you will be ridiculed and ostracized and so on. I mean, it really has become a religion, you know, a faith-based belief system with dogma and high priests. And there's no other way to describe it. I mean, it's not actual science anymore, so much of it. Sure, so there are possibly some aspects of science that are valid, but not these big issues, not like you know, evolution, Big Bang, and gravity, space, and you know, there's so many problems and issues with these theories.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you're just joining us late, this is the impromptu chat with myself, John the Bonner, Matrix Decode. This is the third time that we've done this, and the last couple of times we've got more than 1,000 total views, which means that, and I don't think they're tuning in because they're the biggest fans of Matrix Decode or of John the Bonner. They might like us, they might not, but there are people out there who just like to hear these conversations. There are people who like to hear these kinds of things being discussed because in their own mind, these are interesting topics. And to me, it amazes me that more people aren't fascinated by the fact that some of the arguments that they were given for them living on a spinning ball are easily provable false. Like, that's what really interested me. When someone said, "Oh, have you heard of the flat Earth theory taking over?" I was like, "No." Like, what? Like, what are they? What? Like, how? What? How on earth could that be taking over? What do you mean? And it's like, well, you know, they debunk a lot of the spinning ball arguments, like you know, water going down a drain and the ships going over the horizon. And I was like, really? Because I was given those arguments when I was a kid. Are you saying that they're debunkable? Oh, yeah, they're easily debunkable. Oh, really? So I looked into it, and that I was like, well, I am very fascinated by everything around me, especially the earth on which I walk. If I used to believe I was on a ball because of those reasons, I need to go and find better reasons because you know, I must be on a ball. And that leads you down the path of realizing, wow, a lot of the arguments you were given for the ball, they're not just debunkable, they're easily debunkable. And once you come to learn that, even if you want to believe you're on a spinning ball, how can you not be excited to go out and find the real reasons for living on a spinning ball when you learn that a lot of the other ones are crap? It amazes me how many people aren't fascinated by this. At the same time, there obviously plenty of people are. So we've got more than 20 people watching right now. I'll read out a couple of the comments from the live chat. Let's see. We've got Watcher1421 says, I used to be a real nerd regarding mainstream science facts. I always got a headache trying to fudge them all together. And Depopulation Agenda says, hi, Gino. I loved your show the other night because Gino is in the live chat. And obviously we did Sunday sessions with Adam Bravo in Melbourne a few days ago. And Gino was there live. It was a lot of fun. So good to see you in the chat there, Gino. Good to see everyone out and commenting in the live chat. So anyway, we're just discussing the New Horizon passage of Pluto. That was the first topic for tonight, Matrix. And yeah, I mean, we've shown the video. We've shown that they're just using CGI. We've looked at their story. We've looked at, even if you want to believe their story, it just raises more questions about the rest of their story. It's a nonsense thing. Any final thoughts before we move on to the next topic?
Yeah, well, I mean, on Sunday sessions, we sort of briefly touched on, you know, NASA's origins in the occult and Jet Propulsion Laboratories and Jack Parsons, and you know, how he was a black magician and you know, really into Aleister Crowley and connected to L. Ron Hubbard of Scientology. But I mean, so much of NASA is related to the occult and the mythical, like the use of the name Apollo and so on. And looking at the Wikipedia page, you know, apparently Pluto has 5 known moons. One of them is called Charon. Okay, but the other ones are called Styx, as in the river Styx. Nix, I'm not sure what that means, but another one is Kerberos, which is spelled with a K. You know, that obviously relates to Cerberus, spelled with a C. And Hydra is the other one. You know, Hydra being, I think, the serpent. And so, you know, it's just curious to see how they name these bodies. You know, since 1930 was the first time Pluto was really discovered, and so these moons have been named ever since. And it's just another aspect of a strange aspect of this hidden occult Freemasonic institution that is NASA. And Yeah, there's lots of other issues to do with the occult and NASA. I think it's just another big part of it all. Part of spreading the mythology, the archetypal symbolism, and there's a lot to it with that. I mean, the way they use words, the new horizon. I mean, what does that really mean? You know, when we have a horizon on Earth, you know, and but they're discovering the new horizon, trying to push the boundaries and the final frontier of space, like they mentioned regarding the Voyager probe. I mean, they're just using these big words, these, you know, to seduce people into this belief system. I think magically.
Well, I tell you what, when you talk about the links to the occult and all the rest of it, let me screen share another little thing I've just happened to notice while we've been sitting here. Again, if you're listening, there are shows that we do where we try to be a bit more serious. Today, we're just really having a chat and sort of doing research on the fly. So let me show you some research on the fly that I've just been doing. Again, look, I say even with the shows where I present solid research that I've done in the days or weeks or months before the show, I still say go and double check everything you say. I definitely say that today. Don't believe anything I say today without going and doing your own research. I mean, that should always be true, but especially today, we're just having an impromptu chat and sort of going through this bit by bit. Let me screen share this. Are you able to see this, Matrix?
Not yet.
All right, well, let me try.
Okay, yep.
No.
All
right, here we go. All right, so I've gone to the light year Wikipedia page, and it says a light year, sometimes written light year, unit of length to express astronomical distances, approximately 9 trillion kilometers. Just ridiculous. But anyway, let's go to the history section. The light year unit appeared a few years after the first successful measurement of the distance to a star other than our sun by Friedrich Bessel in 1838. Let's look into him. The star was 61 Cygni, and he used a 6.2-inch heliometer designed by Joseph von Fraunhofer. The largest unit for expressing distances across space at that time, was the astronomical unit equal to the distance of the Earth's orbit. In those terms, trigonometric calculations based on 61 Cygni's parallax of 0.314 arcseconds showed the distance to the star to be 660,000 astronomical units. Bessel added that light employs 10.3 years to traverse this distance. He recognized that his readers would enjoy the mental picture of the approximate transit time for light, but he refrained from using the light year as a unit. He may have resented expressing distances in light years because it would deteriorate the accuracy of his parallax data due to multiplying with the uncertain parameter of the speed of light. The speed of light was not yet precisely known in 1838. Its value changed in 1849 and in 1862. It was not yet considered to be a fundamental constant of nature, and the propagation of light through the ether or space was still enigmatic. The light year unit appeared, however, in 1851 in a German popular astronomical article by Otto Uhle. The paradox of a distance unit name ending on year was explained by Uhle, I apologize for the pronunciation there, by comparing it to a hiking road hour, Wegstunde. A contemporary German popular astronomical book also noticed that light year is an odd name. In 1868, an English journal labelled the light year as a unit used by the Germans. Eddington called the light year an inconvenient and irrelevant unit, which had sometimes crept from popular use into technical investigations. Read that again. Eddington called the light year an inconvenient and irrelevant unit, which had sometimes crept from popular use into technical investigations. Although modern astronomers often prefer to use the parsec, light years are also popularly used to gauge the expanses of interstellar and intergalactic space. So let's just go through that a little bit again. Bessel, this is the guy who supposedly was the first one to find out how far away a star was. He recognized that his readers would enjoy the mental picture of the approximate transit time for light, even though back then they didn't know how fast light went. They even admit that. And then at the end they say that Eddington back then was already saying that it's an inconvenient and irrelevant unit. Let's see when editing was. It had crept from popular use to technical investigation. So Matrix, what I'm making of this is, even if you look at the history of the term light year, it simply started off as a way to allow the simpletons to try to imagine the distances that the so-called scientists were giving them.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, these terms, I mean, something like light, I mean, this is very much, the term light year is dependent on the speed of light, right? And, you know, the speed of light is supposed to be a constant, one of the, you know, universal constants. But someone like Rupert Sheldrake, who was a head of Cambridge science department at one point, and you know, he studied at Cambridge and Harvard, and you know, he makes claims that and shows in some of his lectures, you know, he attacks the known universal constants, and time is one of them. Sorry, light is one of them, and they're apparently, according to him, and some of the, you know, on some of his presentations, you know, light isn't a constant. They just round it off. They just average it out. Now, you know, over the last century, he was talking about and went to various laboratories that measure the speed of light, and it changes. You know, not a lot, but it does change a certain percentage, a small percentage, less than 1% maybe, or something like that. But it does change, and so these measurements, I mean, people should check out Rupert Sheldrake. You know, he goes after mainstream science, and as a top scientist himself, he talks about the dogma and the belief system and how it's no longer real science, or they're not employing the scientific method anymore, just regurgitating this narrow-minded field of science. And so, I mean, the whole figures regarding light years are also, you know, off, because it's been measured that the speed of light is not a constant, but they fudge up the figures to make it out to be one, which is just another aspect for people to consider.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, while I was just reading through some of this other stuff, here's the other thing too. Even if you want to believe in spinning ball, which is totally fine by me, this really is fascinating stuff to go back and look at the history of astronomy and the history of science and the philosophy of science. It truly is fascinating to see how just a few people were able to have such an enormous bearing on everything that came after them to this very day. And so many people who are adamant that they've spent their whole lives on a ball that's spinning around the sun, and the sun is spiraling through a galaxy, and the galaxy is doing God knows what. People who are adamant that they want to believe in that, how few of them know anything about any of the people who first started popularizing these theories. And that includes me. Up until 12 months ago, 3 months ago, I can't even remember when all of this first started really getting interesting, but definitely last year, say the middle of last year, you say to me, was Sandy Hook real? And I say no. You say Boston bombings? I say no. You say the World Trade Center buildings being hit by planes, and I think even back then I didn't even know about that. I think I still thought they were actually hit by planes. I can't remember. But I definitely would have believed for sure in the heliocentric model. How could you not? It's crazy not to. And yet I wouldn't have been able to tell you a name of any of the people involved in making this theory popular. Now you could say, oh, well, that's, you know, you should study that more, and I would agree with you. The issue is, how can you go through 13 years of school and come out knowing that anyone who questions heliocentric model is crazy, but not even know any of the main figures involved in all of it? So if you want to believe in spinning ball, great. I'm not going to try and stop you. I would still encourage you to go and do the research and find out more about this. It's fascinating. It really is. Anyway, we've got to move on to the next topic, Matrix, if that's cool with you. And this is the moon laser reflection. I've done enough talking for now. I need to eat some more of my dinner. Do you want to briefly explain to the listeners what the moon laser reflection thing is all about? And then we're going to play some videos.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to play a video by Mythbusters, right? I mean, they make, you know, people make, and scientists make claims that there are these reflectors on the moon, and you can bounce these signals off them. I think whether they're radio waves or lasers, and you know, the claims that they're making to support those arguments and claims are seem quite far out there. I mean, I'm very surprised, and the arguments are weak. I mean, the results they got, show that the amount of light or something, I think it was from a laser, they got back was 0.000 something percent of the light they sent up there. So it's just not a conclusive evidence that they can actually do this. And people like to talk about it, and people have said, "Oh, I've seen it from on one of our shows before." With someone was saying how their friends at university have gone to use a big telescope, and they've seen these reflectors on the moon, and they've seen the landing sites and so on, and that just doesn't hold true at all. And I think the video you're going to show in a minute is going to demonstrate that. I mean, Mythbusters. I mean, talk about mainstream people that put out there to debunk every conspiracy theory. I mean, they did a show on the moon landings as well, and that's just as ridiculous as well what they're saying in that. I mean, these people are obviously paid to deceive people, and people believe it because it's on the TV and it's science.
Would you believe, Matrix, that when I was in high school, we used to watch episodes of Mythbusters in science class? Would you believe that?
Wow. I guess I'm not so easily surprised anymore, but that does seem rather absurd.
Yeah. And there are people out there who know full well that science, so-called climate science, is easily provable bunk. They know that. They know that it's all just a scam as part of an overall greater scheme of making humans live on less, pay for even the air they breathe, bring in greater global governance, make it easier for non-national government, make it easier for non-national actors to dictate the laws within nations without those people of those nations being able to do anything about it. All these kinds of things. Many people know all of that, but they still want to believe in the scientific institution overall, as if that makes any sense. And then you start to think, well, hold on. If the same people who shill for science in so many other ways are also the same people who still try and pretend the moon landings are real, how much can you trust any of this stuff? I mean, as far as the scientific institutions are concerned, how can you trust any of it? The scientific method, of course you should trust that. That's just common sense. You should be using that in your everyday life. The scientific method makes sense. But the institutions that we call science or that we call scientific, why would you trust them about anything? Once you realize they're lying about something, where else in your life would you allow someone to tell you a monumental lie, decades-long lie, easily provable to be false, and then when you find out it's a lie, then say, well, I'm still going to take on faith everything else they say until someone else proves it wrong. Instead of saying, you know what, now that I know that they can and will lie about one thing, I'm now going to have to put the burden of proof on them to prove any more of their claims. Do you get what I'm saying, Matrix?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an element of denial, to reinforce their beliefs about a person or an institution, a belief system. It's just a powerful thing, this, denial. And, it can easily, people seem to be able to easily brush it under the carpet and save it for a rainy day. I mean, it's strange how people's minds work. When they're presented with evidence, and you can show them clear evidence of fakery, 9/11, or what have you, and they still won't believe it. And it's just an issue that seems to be plaguing humanity. All of us, we all have faced similar problems and issues with our education and the media, hypnosis, and mind control, and so on. So, but when you start to look at these things a bit closer, and you have the time and the will to do so, to investigate these subjects, I mean, it takes on a whole new frame of reference.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I've put this video. This is one called Lunar Ranging at Haleakala Observatory in Maui, Hawaii, circa 1990. Got it on full screen. Is that coming through to you?
Not yet.
What about that?
No, no, still not seeing it.
Well, I was able to do the full screen share on Sunday sessions and it works, but it doesn't seem to be working this time for some reason.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it. Yeah.
All right.
I'm just seeing your logo.
Yeah, I'm with you. It says I am screen sharing though, so I'm not too sure what's happening there. What about the listeners? Can they see? Yeah, they're all seeing. In fact, they were seeing in full screen, actually, were they? Yeah, they were seeing in full screen, so I'm going to put it back on full screen. I think they can see it. You might have to watch it in the other window if you can.
Okay.
And of course, it's our friends at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. They must have workshopped that one early on, like focus grouped it, and they must have found that the words jet, propulsion, and laboratory are all key words for lighting up the parts of the brain that the masses find respectable, like the word jet, ooh, propulsion, ooh, laboratory. Well, it must be real. I mean, look at this, jet propulsion laboratory. You wouldn't lie about something like that? What's all this crap?
This desolate landscape, Haleakala Crater, is located on the Hawaiian island of Maui. It looks very similar to the distant, pock-marked wastelands of the moon. And it is here, at the Lure Observatory, that NASA and the University of Hawaii are involved in work which helps us understand the geophysical science of the moon and the Earth. Lure Observatory, situated at the 10,000-foot summit of Mount Haleakala, uses laser technology to accurately range within 1 inch the 240,000-mile distance between the two bodies.
Within 1 inch, eh? Let's make a note of that. Within 1 inch, okay. All right, whatever you say.
Ranging or measuring distance is accomplished.
Well, he's wearing space goggles, so you have to trust him, I guess.
By clocking the time it takes bursts of laser light to leave the observatory, hit one of...
Okay, now I'm pretty sure they're not trying to pretend that that's real. That's like meant to be an artist's impression, like all of the other NASA stuff.
4 retroreflectors on the moon and return to the observatory.
So you guys will get the official story here. The official story is they're reflecting light off the moon. How's it reflecting off the mirrors, which proves that man must have put it there. That's the official story.
By measuring the continually changing distance between the Earth and Moon, we are able to unlock many details relating to the motions of both bodies. Analysis of day-to-day changes in the Earth's motion.
More fish islands. I mean, here's the funny thing too. You never notice this stuff until you realize it. Once you realize it, you notice it everywhere. Fish islands.
Help scientists better understand the Earth's rotation, continental drift, weather phenomena such as the El Nino effect, and forces deep within the Earth that set off earthquakes. There are currently 2 other observatories located around the world which also participate in lunar laser ranging, but as yet neither has achieved the level of precision of the Lure facility. Much more will be learned in the future by interpreting data from many stations simultaneously. The accuracy of ranging has come a long way since Apollo astronauts Armstrong and Aldrin placed the first retroreflector on the moon. A member of the technical staff at the Jet Propulsion...
No stars. No stars. Of course, the astronauts didn't see stars, which Neil Armstrong says, oh, yeah, no, we didn't see any stars up there. No, I don't remember. I just took a trip to the moon and back, and I don't remember if I saw any stars. Oh, I'm pretty sure we didn't see any stars. You've got to be kidding me. What do you think of this, eh? Yeah, no, ridiculous. Anyway, carry on.
Astronauts Armstrong and Aldrin placed the first retroreflector on the moon.
Remember, there are people who are allowed to vote for your supposed government who think this is real. Just think about that. Let that sink in.
A member of the technical staff at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory working...
The Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
...on lunar laser ranging is Dr. Skip Newhall.
The moon reflectors are composed of an array of several dozen or perhaps a few hundred of these so-called corner reflectors. And they have the nice feature that no matter what direction the light goes in from, it always returns out at exact...
Is that a moon globe? I think that's meant to be a globe to represent the moon.
In the same direction. So when we shine a laser...
How do you make the other side? Like, what happens if he spins at 180 degrees? Does it just come up with an empty face? Is that a moon globe? Looks like a moon globe to me. How can you do a globe when you don't know what the other side looks like? I dare this guy to turn this around 180 degrees.
At the moon, no matter how it's oriented locally, the light comes right back out. When the Apollo astronaut
Notice the background music every time they play this archival footage of the moon landings. Notice it.
The light comes right back out. When the Apollo astronauts first put the reflectors on the moon, we got some returns back in early.
That is just like the background music from what was that Spielberg film with the aliens? What was that one? It's like that kind of music.
1970 and late 1969. The uncertainty in the
is that the photo from the moon of the Earth where the Earth isn't big enough? What's that meant to be back there? What is this even meant to be? This is ridiculous.
Return time was about the equivalent of a distance.
But he is wearing a tie, so I guess really I should give him more. I shouldn't be so harsh on him. He's probably a smart guy. Wears a tie. Smart guy.
Of 150 to 200 meters. That's around 600 feet. We have refined the timing equipment, the lasers, and the other associated electronic equipment that supports this. So now we have the uncertainties and distance are equal to about 3/4 of an inch, which is an amazing improvement.
3/4 of an inch.
The key to the lunar ranging operation is a laser that can be adjusted to create intense billion-watt pulses of energy that makes
the goggles. Yep, got to have the goggles.
its way to the moon and back. The light energy is channeled out of the observatory.
Listen to the music, guys.
By this mirrored instrument, which keeps the laser beam continually locked on target with the retroreflectors on the moon. Meanwhile, in the observatory's main control room, the receiving telescope, which is composed of 80 lenses, is adjusted to line up visually with the moon's Apollo 15 retroreflector near Hadley Rill. The giant telescope acts as a collector for the particles of laser light that make the trip back to the observatory. The time it takes for the light particles to reach the telescope is calculated and fed into data banks. The information returned is analyzed regularly by a group of scientists at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. Again, Dr. Skip Newhall.
What the hell is she doing with a screwdriver?
We have now a means of measuring Earth and lunar phenomena, geophysical, body-oriented science phenomena that were not available.
Oh yeah, what is it? Go on, tell us again. Use all those fancy words again.
A means of measuring Earth and lunar phenomena.
Lunar phenomenon.
Geophysical. Body-oriented.
Science phenomenon.
That were not available by any means before. This is the only way we can measure, particularly connected with the moon.
Yeah, you just sent a bunch of men up there, supposedly, all the way to the moon and back before you could do any of this stuff. I mean, just think, it's just ridiculous.
Lunar laser ranging, helping scientists to learn more about the Earth and our closest celestial neighbor, the moon.
When you understand what you're looking at, this is like watching a children's program, except you know that the majority of the so-called adults all around you are convinced that it's real and are convinced that anyone who doesn't think it's real are crazy. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I like to do these shows when I'm having a few beers, because it sort of numbs the pain, but this is actually painful to watch. Matrix, there are people who actually believe all of this crap. They fully believe it.
Loving your commentary there, man. I think the movie you were referring to, the Steven Spielberg one, was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of.
And about this video that you're showing, I mean, it's just interesting that Asian woman was there with her screwdriver at that point in time, just to adjust something, technically to do with that receiver. I mean, it's just fortunate that happened at that moment in time. It caught on camera,
Is that a camera crew? Is that a camera crew here to report on us and the amazing work that we do? Well, what are the odds? Today just happens to be the day that I wear my pink sweater and adjust something with a screwdriver. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll pretend you're not even there. I'll just do what I normally do. You can film me. That's okay. I'll sign the release papers. What a load of nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's all right there, right in front. Just with that on itself, it's all staged, and she's trying to look sincere in the video, and as if she's actually doing something worthwhile and important, and it's all obviously staged.
Yeah, well, in the live chat, we've got almost 30 people watching. Thanks again for coming out. Gino says that tonight he tried to question his father about the possibility that we were lied to about nukes, and he says that he got a fascinating reaction. It is interesting, isn't it, Matrix? I know that you probably haven't spoken to as many people. You're an Englishman in Spain, and you probably don't have as many opportunities to just ask people these kinds of questions, but it is fascinating the reaction that you get from people when you so much as suggest that the footage that we just saw was faked.
Yeah. The programming is so strong in people. I mean, it's any moment you question authority, the belief in authority is, people, roll their eyes, get angry, dismissive. It just changes, confronts their reality, their whole belief system, and you're taught to ridicule anyone who does question authority. I mean, I think it was Albert Einstein, and he has a couple of good quotes, but one of them was, blind belief in authority is the greatest enemy of truth. And I think that is a spot on reasoning that he uses there, logic. It just really says it all.
Well, I haven't read that quote myself. It wouldn't surprise me if that was attributed to Einstein. I guess it's one of those cases where the scientismists would say you have to have complete faith in Einstein's theory of relativity, but don't have any faith in Einstein's belief in the scientific method in questioning things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Completely believe his outlandish explanations for the phenomena that we observe, but don't have any faith in him when he says that you should question things. I mean, that's what we're dealing with right now. In the live chat, an old friend of mine, B.O. Smiley, says, is Jono talking slowly tonight to make up for his amped up speaking on Sunday? Of course, on Sunday I was down there in Melbourne in the northern suburbs. I was hosted by Adam Bravo. Gino was there. A couple other people were there. We had a good chat. And I was speaking particularly fast. And I had to get out everything I wanted to say. But tonight's a bit more casual. And hopefully I'm enunciating all of my words relatively well. But we just watched that first video there, Matrix. When did you know that they claimed that they could send lasers to the moon and back before you started doing this research? Like, were you told that in school and you just believed it?
Well, I was in school over 20 years ago, so I think things have changed since then. But, the whole laser issue, I mean, they might have to have a really powerful and amazing laser to be able to send it 240,000 miles without any interference or any distortion. So that technology is rather impressive.
It is. Here's the thing. I didn't know that they claimed that they could shoot a laser to the moon and back until I started doing this research. And I went out with a guy for lunch a few weeks ago. He was in town, hadn't seen him for a while. And I thought, I'm not going to bring up anything too out there over lunch today, but I will just bring up the ball of skepticism in a roundabout way. And, I said to him that I knew these people online and they were pretty convinced that the moon landing footage was all fake. And he looked at me incredulously. He was like, how can it be fake? He's like, we know that we shot lasers up to the moon and back. And I thought to myself, really? We shot lasers to the moon and back. And it was the first time that I'd heard someone try and use that as a justification for the moon landings. And I thought, oh, okay, fair enough. If if we're shooting lasers to the moon and back, then it all must be real. Fair enough. And I just dropped the topic there. But this is actually something that a lot of people believe, is that we can shoot lasers to the moon and back. And most of the people in the live chat can see that it's ridiculous, but it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of people still out there believe it. And I think one of the reasons why they believe it, Matrix, is because of Mythbusters. Have you seen the episode where they bust the myth the moon landings were a hoax?
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, I think it's it's one of these propagated myths to support this whole spinning ball theory idea. That they like to push it every day, everywhere. It's similar, very similar to the laser bouncing a laser off the surface of the moon and so on. Is very similar to the idea that water spins down plug holes in different directions in different hemispheres. I mean, most people have heard that in the Western world, at least, about the water spilling down plug holes and drains and so on, toilets. And that myth has been pushed out there. But you can go and check. Most people would claim that. It turns in different directions, either side of the equator and so on. And it's this kind of belief that's been pushed out there repetitively, either in schools or on TV. And but you can go and verify for yourself that that is an absolute myth. It says so on Wikipedia, the Library of Congress, and they explain why it's a myth and why it's not possible for it to be constantly going in those directions. So I think this is just another one of those myths that have been put out there to help reinforce the narrative.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to watch this Mythbusters nonsense. Before we do, though, I come to you. You've never heard that there are supposedly lasers being shot to the moon and back, and that we can use this as proof that humans have been to the moon. And I'll show you that 4-minute clip that I just did, but without interjecting, without saying anything over the top of it. What are some of the first objections that come to your mind when you're trying to get your head around it? What are some of the first things that pop out to you that say this seems a bit dodgy?
Well, I guess the distance, the so-called distances involved in getting a signal to the moon and getting a signal back from the moon. And if there's all this solar radiation and alleged gravitational forces interfering with these things, distorting space-time, as they like to say, I think there's got to be problems with that. And motion in the sky, the moon is moving across the sky, and the Earth is spinning and lining these things up. And I imagine there are issues like that they would face.
Yeah, I'm with you. You know what? I like people who question things, and it amazes me how there are some people out there who will question me for doing a show like this, but they won't question the people who are pushing the satellite hoax. I just realised that our friend B.O. Smiley, he's discovered that I made a little cameo in the local Melbourne newspaper recently, and apparently it's very suspicious that while I was down there in Melbourne, I was taking part in the little vox pop that the Herald Sun does down there. Apparently that's very suspicious. Okay, I like that kind of suspicion, B.O. Smiley, but why do you not apply that to the people who are trying to tell you that the moon missions might have been real? Hey, I mean, come on, mate. Boy, what can you say to these people? How do you like that one, Matrix? I pop up in the local newspaper down there in Melbourne, and that's suspicious. People trying to say that the moon landings might have been real and that satellites are definitely real, that's not suspicious. I mean, I don't really want to talk about all of that too much tonight, but I just noticed that, couldn't help but bring it up. Please, guys, good. Be suspicious of things. Be skeptical of things. I like that. But instead of directing that skepticism at some guy on the internet who talks about these things, why not direct it at NASA? And why not direct it at the people who are pushing NASA's lies, man? Come on. This is just getting silly. But anyway, where was I? Yes. So what we're going to do is we're already an hour into the show, Matrix. We didn't really plan to make this one too big a show, so we better start cracking along here. I'm going to screen share some footage from our friends at the Mythbusters. Let's see, where are we? Mythbusters, yes. All right, present. There we go. I really need a producer for these things now. Where were we? Mythbusters. All right. So let's play this one, and I'll try not to interject too much. I can't promise anything, though, because this stuff's ridiculous.
Time for just one final test. And not just any old test, but the ultimate proof of man's moon mission. What's this? A reflector. In fact, it's called a retroreflector, made up of many tiny prisms just like this. And did you further know that the Apollo astronauts were nice enough when they visited the moon to leave several of these on the surface so that Earthbound scientists could point lasers at it and gather information about the moon?
So what you're saying is that we get a really big laser and pointed at the reflector on the moon. And if we get a signal back, that means that we were, in fact, there.
Precisely.
Okay, now, if you're smart, you know that all of that was scripted just then. Notice how they scripted that. I'm not trying to do a full review here, but I can't help but point this out. Notice how they scripted this little segment. Look at this.
Test. And not just any old test, but the ultimate proof.
The pump up music,
mission.
photo of the moon.
A reflector.
In fact, it's called a retro.
So one guy plays the, oh, I don't know what's going on. The other guy plays the energetic, let me explain it to you.
Reflector, made up of many tiny prisms just like this. And did you further know that the Apollo astronauts were nice enough when they visited the moon to leave several of these on the surface so that Earth-bound scientists could point lasers at it and gather information about the moon?
So, you know, explaining it as though you'd explain this to a child. I guess this is kind of directed at children as well, but I know that many adults think it's real as well.
So what you're saying
is, so what they want to do is reinforce it in your mind. Get the first guy to tell the silly story, then get the second guy who apparently didn't know, but now he knows. So what you're saying is
that we get a really big laser.
A really big laser.
And pointed at the reflector on the moon. And if we get a signal back, that means that we were, in fact, there.
Precisely.
Now, of course, if you really want to believe in Mythbusters, you'll say, oh, but Jono, of course they both know about the lasers. They just have to do this dialogue to get, you know, to make the point clearer to those watching. And I say, yeah, I'm agreeing with you. Of course, both of these guys know. And of course, this is all done intentionally to make it easier for the listeners to follow. That's what I'm pointing out. Look how they script this. This isn't trying to give you information for you to digest. This is trying to make you feel like you're almost like you're the one having this back and forth. Did you know? Oh, well, oh, really?
Okay, it breaks down like this. A retroreflector bounces light back at the
Listen to the sound effects, by the way.
light source, regardless of the angle. This differs from a mirror where the angle of incidence has to be perpendicular. So, if there was a retroreflector on the moon, and we knew its exact location, and we had a powerful enough laser, we could detect the reflection and prove there is man-made equipment on the moon.
What are we supposed
Yeah, words escape me.
to be doing?
Technically, we're supposed to have a conversation about where we are.
Oh, you mean like the Apache Point Observatory? This thing right here is the Apache Point Observatory.
Listen to the sound effects. Ooh.
And these guys have the tools that we need to put the final nail in the coffin on the moon landing hoax.
And he doesn't mean put the final nail in the coffin, the moon landing hoax has improved, the moon landing was a hoax. He means those people who question whether we put men on the moon and got them back on 6 different missions in 3 years, 50 years ago, and haven't gone back, those people who question that, we're going to use these lasers to put the final nail in the coffin of those people.
Yep, up here in the Sacramento Mountains, New Mexico. Adam and Jamie meet one of the observatory's top docs, Russell McMillan.
How can I help you today?
Well, it seems that there are some people that do not believe that man has actually been to the moon.
Can you believe that? There are people who don't think that man has been to the moon.
That man has actually been to the moon.
I've met some of them.
What do you think?
I think they're crazy.
Of course they're crazy. And again, this is all obviously scripted, blatantly scripted. Let's just
Believe that man has actually been to the moon.
I've met some of them.
What do you think?
I think they're crazy.
A bold statement, but Dr. McMillan has the hardware to back it up.
Dr. McMillan has the hardware to back it up.
Here's the thing. This little laser pointer is about 10 milliwatts. That's great, but it's not going to make it to the moon and back. That thing, however, peaks at 1 gigawatt. That's 100 billion times more powerful than this is. That's what you got to have to make it to the moon and back.
This is actually not a bad imitation of exactly what's on the moon that we're shining the laser into. In fact, the specific one we're shining into was left there by the Apollo 15 crew. Now, we're firing on the order of 200 quadrillion photons per laser pulse at that reflector, and we're getting...
Listen to the sound effects. This is really aimed at the minds of people that are no more developed than a child. I know that might sound full on, but you have to understand that's exactly what's going on. This is aimed at you as though you are a stupid child, because if you still believe in all of this crap, then in many ways, that's exactly what you are.
One 1 in 3 photons back per pulse if we're lucky. When we get that photon, getting between 1 and 3 photons back per pulse if we're lucky.
So they send quadrillions of photons up there, and they get 1 to 3 back if they're lucky.
When we get that photon back, we'll see a spark.
When we get that photon back, we'll see a spark on this screen. That's the proof. You know those people who question whether we went to the moon? Well, I can prove them wrong with this little graph. You see? Case closed. 100% sent to Saturn.
Like that.
Yeah, I won't say it.
On the screen.
I am slewing the telescope to the lunar highlands.
Flew away.
Where's that lady with the screwdriver? Don't you need to do some final minute checks?
Number 1, shining our laser at a portion of the moon's surface devoid of all band.
Now, there's the goggles. See, here's the thing. Again, I doubt these people, but I wasn't paying enough attention. He does wear the goggles. This could actually be legitimate.
Made objects, including retroreflectors, known to locals as the lunar highlands.
There's the moon. You can see the craters.
Oh, yeah, of course you can. Look at that. Ah, who'd ever doubt this?
With the laser pointed at a random location on the moon's surface,
Initiating laser.
Dr. Macmillan pulses 200 quadrillion photons into the night sky.
200 quadrillion photons.
So we're shining the laser on the lunar highlands now, and we're getting nothing back except background light.
As expected, the lunar regolith, with its reflectivity index or albedo of approximately 8%, simply scatters the beam, and the sensors back here at the observatory detect no reflected light.
Now I'm going to move to Apollo 15.
Woohoo!
Apollo 15, crewed by Scott, Irwin, and Warden, set down at the base of the lunar Apennine Mountains, which is where they placed the retroreflector.
That was probably before their dune buggy ride. Were they the dune buggy guys? They just got more silly with each mission, didn't it? By the end, they were playing golf and cruising around in dune buggies on the most hostile, on the most hostile land that man had ever stood on. They just cruised around in a dune buggy, and they dropped all these laser pointer mirrors around as well, just for the hell of it. It really is.
That's the location where Apollo 15 landed on the moon.
That is so cool.
Oh, that is so cool.
Initiating laser on retroreflector from Apollo 15.
Initiating laser reflector Apollo 15. Ooh.
And there's a...
Oh, there it is. Case closed. I need to call up that friend of mine and say, hey, dude, I'm really glad you set me straight about that one. I looked into it and I can see for myself. How could I have been so foolish as to doubt these scientists? I mean, if that isn't conclusive proof that we sent 6 missions worth of men to the moon and back without fail 50 years ago, haven't gone back since, and while they're on the moon, they're able to just hang out, play golf, cruise around on dune buggies. With 1960s technology, if this isn't proof, then what is? If this isn't enough for you to see that the clearly fake-looking footage was actually 100% real, then nothing will convince you. Really, come on, lasers, guys, scientists. Jet propulsion laboratories. Come on now, come on.
Light beginning to stand out.
Is that it?
That's the return from Apollo 15. Light returning from the laser retroreflector at exactly the wavelength and distance that we were expecting.
Ah, there you go. See, there you go. There's your scientific method. They predicted that those bars on that screen would rise, and those bars on that graph rose exactly as predicted. That's science, guys. That's falsifiable. Because if this was all fake, that computer screen wouldn't have shown the rise in photons, you see. So you can trust these people because they're using science. I mean, they would openly tell you as well, if this was all just make-believe computer, just programmed ahead of time, they would tell you. I mean, come on, you can trust. They're only getting billions of dollars here, guys. Do you really think people would make up such a shabby demonstration for a few $1 billion? Come on. Have some trust in people.
That is so cool. I know you do this like 100 times a year, but it's really thrilling to watch.
This guy, how does this guy sleep at night? Seriously, like there's being an actor, and then there's being this kind of actor. He must be part of some kind of secret society or something. I don't know. Maybe he got caught like in a huge tax avoidance scheme, and they said, "Listen, we need a guy to pretend to be a scientist to appeal to the children out there and the people with childlike psychologies to get them to believe in what we call science. And it's either you play the funny, weird, dopey guy that somehow people can relate to, or we push it behind bars. And he's like, oh, I'll do it. What do I have to do? Tell him I saw a bar on a graph that proves the moon landings? I'll do it. I'll do anything.
Right in front of us. Not just thrilling, but conclusive.
Look, I'd love to go to the moon, but I can't. At least not right now.
No, you can't, and nobody on this planet can. And anyone who says otherwise is, at best, a gullible fool, and at worst, a paid actor or someone in on it just like yourself. Disgusting.
So we did the next best thing.
We shine that laser at the moon on the second.
What? So you can't go to the moon, but you'll do the next best thing and show us a chart on a computer.
100 times a year, but it's really thrilling to watch it happening right in front of us. Not just thrilling, but conclusive.
Oh, well, there you go. Conclusive. Case closed. Sent to Saturn.
Look, I'd love to go to the moon, but I can't. At least not right now. So we did the next best thing.
We shined that laser at the moon on the second test, and we got a clear spike back. Photons came back to our receptor. Now, the only way that could happen is if there was a piece of man-made equipment up on the moon to reflect them back.
So get over it. There's no conspiracy here.
We've been there. We've done that.
Jesus Christ. Matrix, look, I'm sorry that I kept interjecting there. That probably took 10 or 15 minutes for a 4-minute clip. So you have the floor for a moment. You tell me what you thought of all of that.
Yeah, man. I've got someone's doing some hoovering in the background. Can you hear it? Is it too much? Or?
No, it's fine, man.
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, one of the things they start off by saying there is, they've got the ultimate proof. I mean, what did we see? We saw someone, in some dodgy-looking observatory, possibly, or garage or studio, with some machine pulsing a laser. Where? We don't know. What was the proof they had? They got a tiny reading from or photons received back allegedly because someone said so on the TV. I mean, for me, they also, their studio where they started off with their studio workspace was full of props. It had the astronaut helmet and various other things, all there to suggest that this is all about science and the moon and what have you. And one of the things he asked is, we are supposed to question where we are. It's just something he put in there when he was talking. And they like to use this music and speech, this combination. It makes the mind more suggestible when you have these two things going on. It messes with your auditory senses and makes you more suggestible. It's one of the things they use in TV programming and brainwashing. I think the goggles he was wearing were a prop. I mean, sure, you are supposed to wear goggles around lasers, but the laser was pointed up in the sky and it was pulsing. It wasn't a continuous laser. And and he was looking at the computer screen wearing the goggles, and it's just sort of a bunch of props. And the Apollo 15, they developed the technology of this reflector, this so-called amazing reflector that is made up of all these different pyramidal, glass prisms, what have you. And they were so advanced. It seems more advanced than the lunar module itself. And how they could orientate it to face the Earth in the way they did, and back then. I mean, clearly the Apollo missions were fake, provably fake, in so many different ways. So they didn't go there. They didn't put no reflector on the moon. I mean, this is just pure propaganda that we're seeing here. And the two presenting it, they're laughing, they're mocking, they're joking. As you said, it's heavily scripted. And when they ask that woman, well, what do you think of these people who question it? And she puts it in, oh, they're crazy. These people don't look crazy on the screen. That woman and those two doing the Mythbusters show, they look mad. They look totally nutty to me. So yeah, it's just a blatant piece of propaganda, and just to support their false myth. And the amount of photons they got back was extremely tiny in comparison to the signal they sent out.
Matrix, that's if you believe that they got any photons back at all.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to take their word for it. You know, they're looking at a computer screen, and they've got a so-called laser there that can travel 240 miles, perfectly aligned to the, you know, with the Earth spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, and the moon rotating and so on. So yeah, they do wonders with this technology.
You know, I should say, by the way, for the listeners, when Matrix says that there's some hoovering in the background, I think is that a British term for the vacuum? I don't know if that's, we don't use it in Australia. I don't think they use it in America either. Hoovering. But no, it's not too bad, man. We can kind of hear it in the background, but it's nothing too big. Oh yeah. Here's the thing that gets me is, let's just suppose for a moment that we really do live on a spinning ball, and the heliocentric model is completely correct, and you and I are wrong to think that there are some problems with the model, and man has been on the moon, and suppose all of that's true. Just for a moment, let's just suppose that's true. If the only evidence that NASA would have to provide to prove that to people was a computer screen with a bar graph going up when someone tells it to go up, what do you think they're going to do with the $18 billion a year that they get for their so-called space missions? I mean, even if all of it was true, why on earth, if you were NASA, would you actually spend the money to go and do all of that nonsense when you can prove it to people as easily as saying, we just shot a laser, and as you can see on the screen, we've just got the laser photons back. Clearly, we've been to the moon. Any questions? I mean, it amazes me that people can't think through this one a little bit further here. If all the evidence you need is that kind of nonsense, then why would you expect it to ever get more than nonsense?
Yeah. I mean, people will believe that. You know, it will reinforce the narrative, the belief system. There you go. Didn't you see the Mythbusters the other day? They proved it. They showed it on TV. You know, with their impromptu interview where they turn up there and they ask these random questions and get these random replies. And wow, just on the spot there, they did it right there and then, conveniently at that time of day. And amazing how it all worked out. And it's totally believable. I mean, it's just obvious. I mean, you got to just the evidence they presented there was just the ultimate proof, irrefutable, you know, undeniable, man.
Conclusive was the word that they used. He said, I can't go to the moon at the moment because I still want to push this myth that one day people can go there. So he's like, I can't go to the moon at the moment, but I can do the next best thing, which is come to this supposed laser and telescope outfit and supposedly shoot a light at the moon, supposedly get some photons back, and that's proof. And that's conclusive. That's the final nail in the coffin for people like you and me who question the moon. I mean, that, again, even if you want to believe all this crap, the fact that they would try and pass that off as evidence should be enough to tell you that something very dodgy is going on here right now.
Yeah, I mean, never mind all the other photographs and the video evidence and the inconsistencies and the absurdities. This has proved it to me that we definitely went to the moon. You know?
Yeah. Sorry, man. I just had to take my laptop with me down to the kitchen to get some more of my vegetable soup. I was down in Melbourne for a few days and I didn't really have time to make any veggie soup, and I think it's good for you. It's like medicine, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's good to get those veggies, man. That's really important.
Yeah, it is. I don't eat veggies enough. Like I try and make an effort to eat them. You know, I try and make an effort to make them. I try to pretend like I'm going to do it every day, but you know, some days I'm just a lazy. I'm not good enough to myself. So today I'm eating veggies and I'm feeling good. But mate, this show's gone. It's amazing when I talk to you. This happens on Skype as well. Just time goes too quick. We're already basically 3/4 of the way through the upper limit of the show. So that's the moon proof of the laser. And we should move on now to the third topic, gravity. Now, I said on Sunday sessions that day when I was at Adam Bravo's house, we were chatting about a few things, and suddenly it occurred to me, hold on, this wobbling of the precessions of the equinoxes, because Adam was talking about that, and I was like, hold on, what's the official story for the precession of the equinoxes? And he said, oh, it's just a wobble. And I thought, hold on, a wobble, what do you mean? And he said, oh, the axis of the Earth wobbles. And I said, hold on a second, what do you mean it wobbles? And so I started thinking about it, and I couldn't get my head around it. I picked up some fruit that was on the table and just sort of trying to get my head around it. And I was like, hold on, this doesn't really make any sense. So I thought about it a little bit, and then I talked about it on Sunday sessions. And for me, gravity seems to be, and this is just one example of it, one of the biggest problems with the official story. I want to go more on about that in a moment, but first, I know that you've got some things that you wanted to talk about to do with gravity, so I'll give you the chance to do it. And again, I want to say thanks to the people for coming out. We've got more than 30 people watching live right now, and we appreciate it. This is just, well, normally when we talk, I don't make the effort to sort of explain myself as well. I can just be a bit more casual with you. But since we're having the chat, I thought let's go live and let the people listen, and more than 30 people listening, so thanks for coming out. Keep posting your questions. We'll try and get to them. But Matrix, gravity, I know you've got some problems with it. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of problems. I mean, since I've been looking at this subject about space and the shape of the Earth and how things work, I mean, you come up against gravity. You know, it's a serious topic. Yeah, I mean, there's so many problems. I mean, how gravity working on our planet, in the solar system, regarding the moon, the sun, and so on. I mean, how gravity can hold down, you know, trillions of tons of water in the oceans and keep that fixed to the, you know, the center of the Earth, and yet at the same time, little things like you know, mosquitoes, flies, and even human beings are capable of resisting that force. You know. So, I mean, then I've also been, I mean, one of the things I was discussing with Event Skeptic was, you know, something like, you know, crossed my mind when I started to question was, you know, if the height of the International Space Station, which is between 150 miles and 250 miles up, they experience a zero gravity environment. Yeah, they like to call it microgravity. Yeah, I wonder, like, if the Earth is, you know, the Earth's gravitational field is so powerful, it can keep the huge mass that is the Moon. You know, one can only imagine, you know, in their model how heavy it is and how big it is and so on. You know, apparently the Earth's gravity can keep that locked into its path around us. Yet the same gravity appears to disappear at 150 miles up, you know, and in space, you know, these astronauts inside and outside of the space station and elsewhere, you know, they're experiencing zero gravity, and I wonder how this magic gravitational force extends mysteriously, you know, towards the Moon and so on, and you know, keeps the Moon in its place, and you know, the Moon, which is supposedly 1/6 the Earth's gravity, has an effect on our tides, you know, in the sea. They like to allege. Yeah, it doesn't have the same effect on lakes. You know, there's a lot of problems, and it's just something I really began to investigate seriously. And you know, it is a theory; it's not proven, and there's you know, when you read the gravity Wikipedia page, they talk about, you know, Einstein's theory of general relativity has been introduced to account for some of these problems. You know, apparently there's some issues with Mercury, and the reasons why I think it's either Neptune or Jupiter spins in a different direction to everything else, apparently, which kind of contradicts the whole concept related to the conservation of angular momentum, you know, which is apparently come from the Big Bang, and everything should be spinning the same way. But, you know, things don't apparently spin the same way. You know, one of these big planets doesn't spin the same way. Mercury's got some anomalies to it, and they try and write this off with Einstein's theory of relativity. And so there's lots of problems, and maybe we can get into discussing a few more of them.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, man. I'm just eating some of this veggie soup. Okay, let me throw one. Okay, let's go back to ISS. I'll screen share some footage, and hopefully, because you know when you screen share, sometimes whenever someone else talks, the footage goes, it disappears, and sometimes it stays. I'll try and see if I can get this one to stay, so that even while you're talking, it'll still be there. So just let me see if I can suss this out. Let's have a look. All right. So I'll play this in mute, and hopefully the listeners can see it. This is inside the ISS, and so it sounds to me like what you're saying, what you were talking about on Skype before I said let's just do a live show. is that you're wondering, how can gravity affect the space station but not affect these people? Is that kind of where you're going with it?
Yeah, I'm saying, how come this supposedly strong, really one of the most strongest forces in the universe, right? That is holding the moon, which is this, so-called astronomical body with such a large mass. It's holding that, it's controlling that. But when pulling it towards the Earth, there's a constant pull towards the Earth. But when you look at the people on the ISS, they're floating in zero gravity inside and outside of the ISS. And, it's commonly believed that, there's zero gravity in space, And so to me, there's a big disconnect there of how gravity would work. I mean, there seems to be, according to their own science, a limitation on how far gravity, the pull of gravity, this force really extends into space, because we're not seeing it where they're only 150 miles up. It's a curious contradiction, I think.
Well, what is the official story with gravity? Is it that once you get past the event horizon, it's 9.8 meters per second, or is the story that gravity gets decreasingly strong? It weakens from the surface right through to the event horizon.
Sorry, man, I'm just breaking up here. My internet's just cutting up, a bit choppy.
I'm just saying, like, my understanding with the official story of gravity is that it gets progressively weaker from Earth right up to the event horizon, right? And my understanding is the event horizon is the edge. Outside of that, you don't feel gravity at all. And then inside it, you do feel gravity and it starts sucking you in. That's my understanding, but that could be completely wrong. Is that how you understand the official story is supposed to work?
The event horizon of gravity. I mean, that's what I'm saying here. I mean, where does it start? Space travel in a vacuum. There's supposed to be no gravity, no effects of gravity. You just float off in any direction whatsoever. And so, yeah, I mean, to do with the event horizon of the gravitational field. I mean, to me, now it just seems more and more absurd that these things are possible, and the reasoning behind it. And when you start looking into it on like Wikipedia or elsewhere, they kind of come up with these really weak excuses and arguments for why these anomalies and discrepancies. I mean, I read a bit from Newton was really one of the main person to come up with the idea of gravity, and Galileo was another one. But I mean, it says here, a discrepancy in Mercury's orbit pointed out flaws in Newton's theory. By the end of the 19th century, it was known that its orbit showed slight perturbations that could not be accounted for entirely under Newton's theory. But all searches for another perturbing body, such as a planet orbiting the Sun even closer than Mercury, had been fruitless. The issue was resolved in 1915 by Albert Einstein's new theory of general relativity, which accounted for the small discrepancy in Mercury's orbit. And then it goes on, although Newton's theory has been superseded by Einstein's general relativity, most modern non-relativistic gravitational calculations are still made using Newton's theory because it is simpler to work and it gives sufficiently accurate results for most applications. Most applications involving sufficiently small masses, speeds, and energies. I mean, when you start looking through what they're saying here, it's just it's all approximations and assumptions, and it's their best guess, and it's not real proof of anything. It's that it is a theory that they put forth, and they haven't figured it out yet. They haven't got a full understanding of gravity. It's just something that has been put there to explain some of these, some of the theories regarding the spinning ball model and the universe as we're being told by these scientists, and the behavior of the universe and why things are the way they are and so on. But I mean, on a flat Earth model and a more simplistic version of why things go up and things come down is, something like density, and related to how dense various materials are, whether they're gaseous or whether they are more solid in matter, and so like a helium balloon rises up into the sky because it's less dense than oxygen. So there were good explanations for what we see already, but it takes someone like Einstein to come along with this special relativity to account for these discrepancies in their model and their theory.
All right. Well, while you were talking, I'm screen sharing here, so I think people can see this. I was wrong about the term event horizon. Apparently, that is the border. It is the border of gravity, but I thought it was just the border between no effect and some effect. That's not right. Apparently, it's the border between the gravity being so strong that it sucks you in, and being not quite strong enough that it definitely sucks you in. That's what I'm making of this. But just going back to gravity here, it seems as though the Newtonian explanation said that the force was dependent on the distance between the objects. So that fits in with what I thought was the case, that they say that gravity becomes less strong the further away you get from the object. So with the International Space Station, if we go back to where are our friends? Where were they? Here they are. Go back to our friends. I think the official story is that at the distance that this object, this so-called space station is at that distance from the Earth, then gravity is a certain strength, less strong, I would imagine, than what it is here on surface level. And then because it's going at this crazy, this tremendous speed around the ball, that even though it's being pulled downwards, it's going sideways enough that it stays at a constant height. Does that make sense? Like, is that how you understand the official? Because here's what we have to do. You have to work out what the actual official story is, and then see if it makes sense to you. So what we're doing here is just going through in our minds, what's the actual official story there? Is my explanation for how the ISS can stay at that height, is that how you understand the official story works? Yeah,
pretty much. I mean, it seems to be orbiting the Earth at a certain speed to maintain its velocity, and there's the absurd speed of 17,500 miles per hour. It's just fantastic to me that they can even dock a Soyuz at that speed and reach those speeds. So I think that's pretty much the idea that they like to say. But I mean, really seeing gravity is not affecting it. I mean, it's just spinning around the Earth, being held in place by gravity, so supposedly, but there is no obvious effects of gravity. The people on the ISS aren't being held in place. They're floating all over the place. And I think this is one of the big issues that is going to be investigated, and more to do with the subject of the shape of the Earth. Gravity. What is gravity? I mean, when you question gravity, it's like questioning the shape of the Earth. It's ridiculous. How can you question it? But I mean, there seems to be so many absurdities and just impossible logic regarding what gravity can actually do. And when you look into their own wording and ideas, like on Wikipedia, you can kind of start to see through it and say, well, these problems that they have, and they're just using general relativity to explain it all away. What happened to the law of the angular conservation of angular momentum? What happened to that? I mean, how do they explain that? How one of the big planets is rotating in a different way, in completely opposite direction to Earth and everything else. I mean, there's so many of these big problems that they face. So it's just a real good subject to investigate. It's something I'm very excited about looking into more.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll tell you what, while we've got this screen share going, I'm reading from my second computer here. So obviously we had Newtonian physics, they called it, and then Einstein came along with his theory of relativity, and so that's the explanation for gravity now. Let me just read out the official story here. In general relativity, the effects of gravitation are ascribed to space-time curvature instead of a force. The starting point for general relativity is the equivalence principle, which equates free fall with inertial motion and describes free-falling inertial objects as being accelerated relative to non-inertial observers on the ground. Okay, so far, okay. In Newtonian physics, however, no such acceleration can occur unless at least one of those objects is being operated on by a force. Einstein proposed that space-time is curved by matter and that free-falling objects are moving along locally straight paths in curved space-time. Let me read that again. Einstein, this is from Wikipedia, by the way. Einstein proposed that space-time is curved by matter and that free-falling objects are moving along locally straight paths in curved space-time. These straight paths are called geodesics. Like Newton's first law of motion, Einstein's theory states that if a force is applied on an object, it would deviate from a geodesic. So from what I'm making of this, what they're saying is that the ISS, suppose that it's on one of these paths around the ball, it's actually on a geodesic. It's on a straight path, but it seems like it's on a curved path because of the effect of gravity. And because I guess the same gravity is working on us, our paths are also straight, but they seem curved. And so I guess that's where they're going with all of this. Let's have a look. Like Newton's first law of motion, Einstein's theory states that if a force is applied on an object, it would deviate from a geodesic. For instance, we are no longer following geodesics while standing because the mechanical resistance of the Earth exerts an upward force on us, and we are non-inertial on the ground as a result. Okay, that changes what I said before. This explains why moving along the geodesics in space-time is considered inertial. Now, I know it's hard if you're listening to me, you haven't got the text in front of you. I highly encourage you, just go and read the official story. Again, I could be wrong, and Matrix could be wrong, and the scientists could be, the so-called scientists could be completely right about all of this. Isn't it still worth you going and checking out for yourself? Go and find out what the official story is. Einstein discovered the field equations of general relativity, which relate the presence of matter and the curvature of space-time, and are named after him. Blah, blah, blah. Then they come up with all of the solutions, because apparently Einstein had these problems with the theory. So there are all these solutions: the Schwarzschild solution, Reissner-Nordstrom, Kerr-Newman, all these different solutions. And then it gets into gravity and quantum mechanics. But Matrix, the point I'm trying to make to people here is they need to go and familiarize themselves with the official story and try to read it as though you do want to be convinced either way, but you're not just going to believe it just because it's science. And when you do that, some of this stuff starts to sound pretty ridiculous, really.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got obviously a straight line is a curve now, according to science, when just the wording they use there. I mean, it's like it seems to me a lot like the Coriolis effect, how they word that contradicts itself. And yeah, I mean, for me, that it's all about assumption, based on assumption. If the Earth is this, then this must be happening, and this, and so the whole assumption is based on the spinning ball model, and it's an approximation, it's a theory, and so on, and they leave it open like that for some reason. They haven't got it all down, and people think gravity is undeniable and the spinning ball is undeniable, and it's not as clear cut as people are led to believe and currently reinforced to believe by the media and schooling and so on. So I mean, in their own words, they're finding problems, and they're writing them off and say, oh, this is an unsolved issue of gravity so far. We haven't figured it all out yet, but you can trust us that it really does exist and is responsible for all of these, quite simply absurd possibilities. The planets all moving around each other, perfectly synchronized, never changing their gravitational alignments and so on. Over billions of years, and all these magnetic forces pulling on each other and so on, and the distortion of space-time, doesn't interrupt, paths and of probes being sent into deep space, and they've figured it all out. Just it's all gravity, and Einstein figured it all out. So we have to just go with that. It's all relative. It's not one way or another. It's all just relative. It depends on the observer. It's not about being objective. It's all subjective. And it's all just relative, man. So.
All just relative. Yeah, I'm still reading this gravity section, trying to get my head around it. They're saying that gravity, let me read this out. Specifics, Earth's gravity. Every planetary body, including the Earth, is surrounded by its own gravitational field, which exerts an attractive force on all objects. Assuming a spherically symmetrical planet, the strength of this field at any given point above the surface is proportional to the planetary body's mass and inversely proportional to the square of the distance from the center of the body, which means that even on modern theory, they're still going with what we said about Newton, which is that the distance from the object makes a difference. So that in theory, there's some point at which you would no longer be, like any given object would no longer be attracted to the Earth, for instance. And then somewhere between where that begins and when you get to the surface, all along that period, you have some kind of spectrum of the force of gravity, seemingly going up exponentially as you get closer to the surface of the Earth, seemingly. Anyway, let's see now. The rate of acceleration of falling objects near the Earth's surface varies very slightly, depending on elevation, latitude, and other factors. For purposes of weights and measures, a standard gravity value is defined by the International Bureau of Weights and Measures under the International System of Units. The value, denoted G, is G equals 9.80665 meters a second squared. It's the one that was originally adopted by the International Committee on Weights and Measures in 1901 for 45-degree latitude, even though it has been shown to be too high by about 5 parts in 10,000. Blah, blah, blah. Assuming the standardized value for G and ignoring air resistance, this means that an object falling freely near the Earth's surface increases its velocity by 9.8 meters a second for each second of its descent. Blah, blah, blah. So they've given us the value of G, and what I would like to know is, what is the value of G at the height that these people are at? Because my understanding, Matrix, was that geostationary satellites are able to remain where they are because they're so high up, the gravity is much weaker, that by simply rotating at the same speed as the Earth, they can remain at that height. Is that your understanding of how geostationary satellites work?
Yeah, it sounds about right to me. Yeah. I mean, they're out there at thousands of miles, in space, following the movement of the Earth, the spin of the Earth, in relation to the spin of the Earth, traveling at far greater speeds than the ISS, and theoretically. And I see you pointing out this, Katie Coleman, I think her name is, and her hair there. I mean, in this video clip we just played, there's a moment where she loses balance and has to hold on to something, and it's extremely suspicious as to why that occurs at that point in time. And there's another video with Sunita Williams, and she's standing there next to the astronauts, the suits they wear, and she has all of a sudden movement in her legs were uncontrolled, and it's quite odd.
Well, I'm showing it now, mate. Pardon me, I think there's some background music there. Basically, I saw this on Ellen DeGeneres. This lady, what was her name? Katie. I saw her. The same thing happened on Ellen, but maybe I'm confusing the clips. You can see it here in this one. Let me just see if I can find that. About 12 minutes, she's there. Now, remember, the official story is that she is going at so many thousands of kilometers an hour right now, orbiting around the ball, and so is this object that she's in. And she's not affected like you and I are by gravity. Now, watch what happens. So she should really be moving, without forces acting upon her, she should remain in whatever motion that she's in. She shouldn't just take sudden curves one way or another. Check this out. All of a sudden, nope, hold on, shit, I'm going up.
Yeah.
So she's there fine at 1 minute. Yep, just sitting there. Everything's fine. Just talking to the camera. Go on, load. What's it doing here? All right, so she's just sitting there. Everything's fine, right? Now, there's no reason for us to believe that she would suddenly push herself off the ground. I mean, if we're being honest, here's the thing: we're almost buying into how ridiculous this is by pointing out how silly it is. If this was serious, why wouldn't she be strapped down to something just to stop her own gesticulations moving her away from the camera? I mean, just for the sake of people watching this on camera, wouldn't she want to make sure that she doesn't push herself away from where she's supposed to be? But no, she's just standing there. Nice, got the nice big perm going on. 1980s all over again. Then all of a sudden, her little necklace starts going silly, but she's doing her best to hold herself down. But it's not going to last because eventually it's going to get the better of her and up she's going to go. Probably
looked at left while I'm up here and also when I get home, and it'll help us understand a lot about how osteoporosis, the mechanism of osteoporosis, which certainly affects millions of people down on the earth.
Do the health implications of that scare you?
Uh-oh.
I won't say they scare me, but I'll tell you that I take them very, very
this scares me.
In that
Hold on.
we exercise,
about
almost 2 hours a day, which I'll say I'm not.
I'm going up. Hold on.
Cut. Down on the earth. But I do it up here because the implications of not exercising are really having a tremendous amount of bone loss.
No gravity up here.
I have a 10-year-old, and I figure I still have a
lot
of running around.
We are not on a plane. We are not on a zero-G plane. Take my word for it. Look at my beautiful perm. Would I lie to you? I'm talking about osteoporosis.
What do you, as a woman, what do you miss the most?
You know, I'm actually so excited about...
I miss the good old days when NASA spent decent money on their zero-G planes and these shots were easier to film. But right now, we're going everywhere. This is tough. I can't work in these conditions.
And just living in this environment and discovering new things every day in terms of what's delightful about just being here, about moving back and forth.
Oh, side to side.
It's just really such a neat place. I don't actually miss anything yet. I certainly miss my family quite a bit. And but at the same time, it's not as if I wish to be there. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, yeah, you'd love being up there on the International Space Station, but they can't take any showers. They have to use tubes to go to the toilet. They have to share those tubes with other people, by the way. And they can't even really brush their teeth or anything because water is so scarce up there. But, yeah, you'd love to be there in a nice, stinky space station with these big, beautiful perm. By the way, Beatrice, you have to admit, there is something cute about her. Apart from the fact that she's a raging fraud and a liar, there is something cute about her, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's really important that that she lets her necklace just dangle around and hit her in the face all the time. That's a really good idea. It's like the hair. I mean, yeah, let's have your big hair just floating around everywhere. Let's not shave it off so it's not inconvenient or doesn't get greasy and what have you. Let's just let it all hang out like that. I mean, it's amazing how the gravitational field of the Earth isn't affecting those tiny hairs on her head. So I think she's well prepped for space there. 6 months in space, yeah, she's going to do well. And when you start looking at the space station and the toilet they have, they've got this flimsy little door, tiny toilet. It's like this metal ring about 3 inches across, and sharp. It looks relatively sharp edges, and you're supposed to press your bum against that precisely so there's nothing can escape. It's just a really pleasant place to be, the space station. It's just such great fun. Every time I see them, they're having a ball on there,
Yeah, you have to wonder too. I mean, look, we've all had jobs where we've had to say things to customers, to get them off, to stop them from, we had to say to them, listen, we're sorry, we'll get there in 2 days or whatever. We all had to sort of do the right thing by the company when we're dealing with customers, do what we've been trained to say, even if we're not really that comfortable saying it. We've all had to do that, whether it's working retail and saying, oh, well, you bought it more than 6 months ago and, our policy is this. And you're like, oh, look, if it was my store, I'd just give you a new shirt. But that's the policy and I don't want to get, we've all had to do something like that and we just get used to it. But with these people, the lie that they are propagating, for me, it really boggles the mind. Does she justify it by thinking, well, does she justify it on a personal level, like she gets lots of money, or do they convince them that this is a noble lie for the people? It's like, well, look, we had to lie to them at the time to get money out of them in the 50s, and then, well, we never really thought that the lie would last this long, and now the NASA's $18 billion budget, if we were to suddenly tell the truth about all of this, a lot of people would be very upset, and there are lots of people who spend their whole lives believing in space. Do you really want to take that away from them? So now it's your job just to keep the lie going, and we'll keep doing this until we've finally convinced, until the people are so stupid they believe in a space invasion, and then we can stop lying about the ISS. We can say that the space aliens shot it, but then we have a war with the space stations, which brings the whole world together. Are they trying to convince them that this is a noble lie because of how many dumb morons are out there who'd actually be upset? And by the way, the dumb morons, they have every right to be upset when they learn that this is fake. They've been sold a lie. So, I don't know, Matrix, you ever wonder how they can justify it to themselves that they're taking part in this elaborate fraud?
Yeah, well, they started off with the lies, the heliocentric model, and then evolution, the Big Bang, and you just got to keep it going, or to keep up the deception, so that people keep people distracted, keep people believing in fantasy and fiction, and the motives behind it are numerous and vast, and it's a lot to do with money, mind control, power over people, and it's just the space station. It's just one of those absurd things that is necessary. I mean, if I was to speculate, they brought out. We mentioned a couple of films on Sunday sessions. I brought them up. Interstellar being one of them, and how they would like to use that word a lot, right? And the film Gravity, and in that film, the International Space Station is destroyed by an event. There's a word for the event, where it all becomes a cataclysmic cycle of debris hurtling around the Earth, going in different directions, and so on. I'll look that up in a minute. But I think, looking to the future, I think something like that will happen when the idea of NASA being pure fakery and a hoax and so on gets bigger and bigger and bigger, because it's inevitable that's going to happen. And so I think if you want to tie it in with the possible staged alien invasion and so on, I mean, there's one way they could destroy it all. Space is too dangerous now to go into space. There's too much debris up there and so on. I think that is a possible scenario that might take place. I'm speculating here, based on the predictive programming, even the predictive programming aspects of movies and Hollywood and so on. They put that movie Gravity out. I mean, it was a powerful movie. I mean, I saw that before I was really questioning a lot of this stuff, and had a big effect on me. I thought it was amazing, and emotionally, and the music and the scene and the drama and the explosion and everything like that was just very, very powerful. And it's all there really just to reinforce this narrative. But on one of the other the space station tours done by Sunita Williams, I mean, I've done a video about it. So much of what she says is just absurd. And she talks about being, if the space station was hit by a meteor, a small meteor or something, they just patch it up. They were her words, oh, we just patch it up, no big deal. And yet, if a meteor did pierce the hull, or some kind of space debris, and there's supposedly a lot of space debris up there, if that did hit the space station at 17,000 plus miles an hour or more, any breach of the International Space Station, the artificial atmosphere inside the space station would be immediately sucked into the vacuum of space. And yet, they play it off as if it's just a holiday out there, nothing to worry about. We just patch up a meteor hole here and there, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah, it's incredible to think that I used to actually believe this was all real, and that's, look, sometimes I do mock the people who still believe in this, but if someone's never really been exposed to the other side, and everyone else believes in a lie, you can't blame them for believing in the lie. I guess my issue is more with the people who know they've been lied to about Sandy Hook or Boston or 9/11. So they do know that they can be lied to, and that most people are so foolish they'll go along with anything. So they've already worked that part out. but they can't work out the same thing is happening with space and the satellites. It's almost like I hold those people to a higher level than I hold your average person. Your average person who truly believes just about any nonsense they're told by the news, I'm not, they can believe whatever they want, who cares? But if you've worked out that the government and their agencies can and do lie with the complete complicity from the media, and they can get away with it, then why wouldn't you be more skeptical of what you're told about space? You, of all people, should be the one asking questions of these jokers. And let me play a video from Roger Linsell. This is called Satellites, Geostationary and Polar. I've never seen it, but let's see if it talks about geostationary satellites. Now, for those who don't know, the story goes that, this is my understanding of the official story, the story goes that as satellites get further away from Earth, they can afford to move more slowly because gravity doesn't suck them in as quickly. So, the further away you get, the less fast you have to travel to avoid getting sucked into the Earth. And then geostationary orbits, which I believe are supposedly the ones that do GPS, they've got some purpose, and they sit, in theory, directly above a spot on the Earth. So most satellites, or many satellites, they're going all around the Earth all the time. The ISS is one of those. The geostationary ones are remaining stationary relative to a point on the Earth. Let's see how they explain this.
In general, there are two groups of satellites: those that orbit like this around the equator, and those that orbit from pole to pole. Almost all the satellites that orbit from pole to pole are at low altitudes. These photograph and examine the surface for analysis of crops, for weather, or perhaps for military purposes. Each orbit may take...
Did he just say that these satellites are used for crops, weather, and military purposes? Well, if you wanted to keep track of crops or the weather, why would you spend all of this money on shooting things up into space where anything can happen to them when you could just use planes which can do the exact same job? It's ridiculous.
Say about an hour and a half. As they orbit, the Earth is turning beneath them, so over the course of 24 hours, they can examine the whole of the Earth's surface. Satellites at a higher altitude will orbit more slowly because the circumference of the circle is greater and the pull of gravity is smaller. A satellite can be launched and put into orbit above the equator and rotate in the same direction as the Earth. If we calculate the height of orbit very carefully, we can place the satellite in orbit so that it exactly matches the rotation of the Earth. The satellite follows the Earth round, always staying over exactly the same point. This geostationary orbit is essential for communication satellites and for global positioning satellites.
Okay, so to Roger's credit, obviously someone's pointed out, that's the guy who made the video, someone's pointed out to him that these geostationary ones aren't used for GPS, but they are used for most bulk communication satellites like Sky TV. Otherwise, you would have to keep moving the dish around. Oh, that's right, because people with satellite dishes think that they're actually... people with satellite dishes actually think that their dish is pointed at a satellite. And for that to work, the satellite would have to be geostationary. Okay, yeah, okay. I used to believe that, by the way.
Global positioning.
I didn't know any better.
Satellites. We can calculate the matching speed, height, and orbit time of every satellite to match its purpose. If the satellite is in stable orbit, then the force of gravity must be exactly equal to that force needed to provide the acceleration to the center.
Now we're getting ourselves some maths. Okie dokie. I'll just write that one down, actually. Let's have a look. I forget what that funky Greek W is called. That's all right, I'll work it out. G-M-M over R squared. All right, let's carry on.
For circular motion. We look at this both in terms of angular velocity and linear velocity. The force required to maintain circular motion is mr omega squared, where omega is the angular velocity. Lowercase m is the mass of the satellite, r the radius of its orbit from the center of the Earth, g the universal gravitational constant, and uppercase M is the mass of the Earth. Thank you for watching.
Hold on, did he just say that uppercase M is the mass of the... Of course, they need the mass of the Earth to do this, which just leads me back, Matrix, to this problem. There are people out there who actually believe that we know how much the Earth weighs. You know, like that right there should tell you just how ridiculous this whole thing is. Well, you're going to weigh the Earth, are you? How are you going to do that?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I wonder that as well. You know, these scientists are good, man.
Just, oh man, I'm going to play another video, but we'll talk while I get the video going, just so people. And by the way, I know that many people listen to these kinds of things on MP3, so I do apologise with some of the videos today. What's this crap? I wanted a video. I'll try another one. I do apologise that today, when I've been playing these videos, I haven't been explaining them. So if you are listening, I do apologise that I haven't made it clear what I'm watching. But you get the basic idea here.
Well, one of the things they were saying in that last video was that, you know, the gravitational force upon the size of the satellite itself is so minimal and just at the right distance that it can keep the satellite in space. That tiny, tiny, tiny satellite in space. Yeah, but when it comes to the moon, which is, you know, I think it's 4 times smaller than the Earth. You know, no gravity. The force on that is, you know, much, much greater, apparently, and sufficient enough to keep that attached in orbit around the Earth. You know, to me, there's a big contradiction there. I just don't see how people can explain that. You know.
Well, you think through this even further, right? So the astronauts on the moon were attracted to the moon, but just not as strongly as we would be attracted to the Earth, right? So they had lesser G. So there's at some point between the Earth and the moon where the moon's gravity overtakes the Earth's gravity, right? But at any given time, that same spaceship is supposedly affecting a force upon the Earth and the moon. So, like, the idea is that the Earth is so strong and the spaceship's so small that the spaceship's gravity upon the moon has almost no effect. It's negligible, right? Okay, fine. But when the moon is also attracting the same spaceship, how on earth can you hope to do the calculations required to get those men in that ship? Like, are you following me here? Like, what they're doing mathematics based on, well, the Earth's gravity, and then at some point the moon's gravity takes over, and it's just like, well, and this was 50 years ago with it boggles the mind that anyone could actually believe any of this crap.
Yeah, it was a piece of cake back then, you know, much easier than it is now to go to the moon. You know, the technology they had back in the 1960s and early 70s was just, you know, super advanced. They could calculate all the different variables, you know. It was a breeze, you know, and they did it on the first try. You know, it was just a very impressive feat they accomplished back then.
And you think about it, if the Earth's gravity is so strong that it can attract the moon, okay then, when the astronauts were on the moon's surface, was there any attraction between them and the Earth? Okay, we're told that the tides on the Earth are affected by the moon's gravity. So obviously the moon can have an effect on Earth. That's how powerful it is. So surely the Earth, which is even more powerful, must be having an effect on the astronauts, even when they're on the moon.
Yeah, and everything in between. Yeah.
Yeah, and remember that with the moon landing, supposedly they had that orbiter, because the officials, and here's the thing too, I didn't know this until I started researching this stuff. The official story with the moon landings was that they would have a guy up in a ship orbiting the moon as the other dudes went down onto the moon and walked around and played golf and cruised around in speed buggies, right? In dune buggies. But there was a guy sort of orbiting above them. And then they would leave the moon, go back to that guy, and then off they'd fly back to Earth. So the guy in the orbiter, when he's on one side of the moon, in theory will have the Earth pulling him towards it and the moon pulling towards the moon. But then when he gets to the other side of the moon, if at all, he'd have both the moon and the sun, the moon and the Earth attracting him. Do you know what I mean? That's if he did go to the other side. But like, how could he not have if he was orbiting? You see what I'm saying? It's just like, I actually feel embarrassed that I'm even bothering to explain this. This is just, Matrix, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, the video footage of that is great. You know? You can see the lunar module depart from the orbiting craft. I think it was Edgar Mitchell was the guy who stayed behind. The unlucky guy that stayed behind, and yeah, I mean, you could see it on his face during that interview that they did, the press conference. But perhaps you can show a couple of those videos as well. I mean, one of the big things that people don't seem to understand when they're questioning this, I mean, it's to do with NASA is a part of the military-industrial complex that has been seeking to control the world for a long, long time, and people don't want to relate the two. They think NASA is this independent, benevolent corporation, let's say, and but really it's just another part of the military-industrial complex to do with satellites, space travel, and so on. So they are part of the overarching conspiracy. I mean, even Kennedy, was it Kennedy? It was Eisenhower who mentioned the plot and the conspiracy of the military-industrial complex. So this is a big part of it. This is a big part of the deception, a big part of the control.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And how can anyone take seriously someone who says you can trust NASA? I mean, even if they weren't part of the military-industrial complex, they have a budget of billions of dollars a year. Billions. And you think you can just trust them? Really? And where do they get the billions of dollars? From you. You idiots. You know what I mean? Without the taxpayer dollars coming in, there is no NASA. You see, it's not like they're producing stuff and selling it to the private sector to cover all their costs. They need that money from you. So what? You understand the government isn't to be trusted, and you understand that big businesses aren't to be trusted. But when you've got a big business that's run by the government, or run for the government, or run past the government, all of a sudden becomes trustworthy? How can you take seriously anyone who says that about anything?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the recent the Mars lunar rover, that press conference is a big joke. I mean, they even say in it, they say, oh, it's I'm not sure how much it costs. It's $1 billion or a lot of money. And they say, well, it was worth it. We created this, I'm paraphrasing here, a movie for the American public, the people of the world. And, your tax dollars, I think, cost everyone something like $6 or $7 each to have this movie, to have this experience, to enjoy it. They're literally saying it, telling you what it is. That people should go and check out that, the Mars Lunar Rover conference, and they can't answer any questions, simple questions about telemetry, location, where they landed. The main guy in charge is just clearly an actor doing his part, and it's just every time you look at it, I mean, they're just not answering the questions. They're stalling. They're making up answers, and it's just a pure fabrication.
The population agenda in the live chat says, how do you weigh the Earth and turn the scales upside down? And Adam Bravo says, if they have geostationary satellites, why don't they put cameras on them to take photos of Earth for the globe composites? But they say they stitch together ribbons of images from moving satellites. Yeah, good point. I mean, that's the thing too, Matrix. People will have noticed while we've been going through today's show, today's chat, if you like, that these are some of these things that we're talking about, we're just looking into right now for ourselves for the first time. People are basically getting to over here, you and I have a conversation about, hey, something doesn't make sense to me. Let's go and see what the official story is and try and work through it. I strongly encourage people to do this, whether it's with people who you can talk to in real life, or if you have to go online and use Skype or Google Hangouts, just spend some time with some people going over the official story and asking each other if it really makes sense to you, because the further you look into it, the more ridiculous, like this is utterly ridiculous, Matrix. We should even have to sit here and point out how silly this is. This is beyond a religion. This is a fairy tale.
Yeah, it's a fanatic cult, I guess. I mean, one of my most recent videos, which is called NASA Hoax Blue Marble. I mean, in that video, I highlight the Earth that they call the blue marble, the imagery that they present as legitimate. And you can clearly see that it's supposedly collected by satellite spinning around the Earth, and they're collecting these ribbons of data, as they like to say, at a certain altitude. And when you look at those photographs, that image, if anyone can go search it online, blue marble image, they copy and pasted all the clouds onto that image. They're trying to pass it off as real. You can see, I've highlighted the duplications of the clouds. You can clearly see it, and you have to wonder. Also in that video, I show that where the positions of the satellites are alleged to be, and they're way beyond, double, quadruple the distance, the circumference of the Earth away. They should be able to easily get a picture of the Earth from space. But they haven't got them. They just don't exist. They have to make up these images, and they present this blue marble image, and it's just a copy and pasted clouds all over it. I mean, they couldn't even get the data on the clouds right. I mean, it's just. And one of the other things they mention when you look up the blue marble on the NASA Visible Earth site, they say that it's a true color image, and the best, the most true color image of the Earth to date. And then you compare that to the 1972 Apollo 17 photograph of Earth that everyone's seen, with Antarctica on the bottom and a little swirly cloud on it. The colouring is really different, and so all they can do is collect satellite data, these ribbons of data, and composite them together in Photoshop, and say this is the Earth that you live on, and it's laughable.
It is, and again, this is what, like I said, whenever I'm doing topics like this, I actually enjoy to have a few beers in me or what have you, just because if I'm just sitting here being serious, this is mind-numbingly stupid, the whole thing. But that's without even considering the fact that most people who live around us believe this, and that's without even considering the fact that not only do they believe it, but they believe it just as strongly as the most devout Catholics believe in the Holy See. You know what I mean? I mean, NASA is to scientism what the Vatican is to the Catholics, isn't it?
Exactly.
And once upon a time, you were a heretic if you spoke out against the Pope or against the Church. Well, you and I are heretics for speaking out against this NASA nonsense. And as far as I'm aware, when the Catholics ruled the world, or at least when they officially ruled the world, they didn't have access to television to poison people's minds with this utter garbage. Like, this is possibly the strongest religion that the world's ever known, because people grow up watching this crap on TV.
Yeah, it's all programming, and people lap it up, and it reinforces their belief system. I mean, that's all there is to it. I mean, it's from birth. You're told that people went to the moon, that gravity is real, the Earth is spinning, and scientists are on the case, and you have to trust them. You have to believe in them. You have to have faith in them, and if you question it, well, then you are a heretic. Like you say.
Well, you know what? We did mean to wrap the show up within 2 hours, so we'll have to wrap this up relatively soon. But you know what? We've been joined in the live chat by one of my favourite NASA pushers. He's a big fan of NASA, and he's got a photo in his username logo of the blue marble that's been turned into a love heart, and it's so appropriate because this guy loves the spinning ball. He loves it so much that he'd rather believe in NASA than realise that his old mate Jeffrey is pushing NASA lies. So I've sent out an invite to my old friend Press Reset Earth, and if he likes, he can come and press reset on everything, on anything that he and I have ever said or that you've said to him, Matrix. He can have the floor, and he can tell us why you and I should believe that human beings have sent into this thing called space objects which don't fall down. And if you'd like to, he can come and explain. He can show us some videos. He can show us some evidence. He can go back over anything you and I have said and point out where we're wrong, and we can have a civil, gentlemanly discussion about it. Because, unfortunately for my old mate Press, he and the rest of his Will Do It Live crew, they've staked all of their credibility on NASA and satellites. And, wow, I never thought it would end this way for them, but seems to me as though any people who still hadn't quite worked out what was going on, the last couple of weeks it's become clear these guys actually think that satellites, that there's thousands of satellites up in space because NASA wouldn't lie, and they've got their old mate Dr. Astro to help them out. So come on, press, the invite's there, mate. You guys always talk about how we're the ones who are the shills and you guys are the truth seekers leading the truth movement. Well, come along then, buddy. You can come on my show. Even when I'm rotten drunk, I still do my best to give people like you and Jeff the chance to speak, to say what you need to say. I do my best to not let people interrupt, even when I'm drunk. And today I'm not. Today I'm stone cold sober. I just enjoyed some vegetables, actually. So you would never get a better chance to explain to the truth community, the truth movement, why they should believe in satellites, because you guys have staked everything on the satellites. So come on, you're welcome on the show. Matrix, what do you say about this? Let's get Press on an impromptu chat, and he can tell me why I should believe that NASA's $18 billion a year isn't just a giant swindle. Matrix, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to hear what he has to say about this thing. Hear his reasoning and arguments and logic behind it all. I mean, I'm surprised that they have stated that their fundamental belief in science being trustworthy and NASA being what it is. I mean, when you want to defend the spinning ball model, you have to look at NASA and what they're presenting us with, the information they're presenting. So, yeah, I mean, I'd be willing to discuss it with him. I'd like to hear what his thoughts are.
Look, I wouldn't have brought him up. I'm doing my best to avoid talking about these people. Sometimes it is necessary, it's topical, and Press Reset joined the live chat, and we've got 35 people there watching live right now, and he says, flat Earth, then he says another comment, yep, flat Earth, should have known. Well, actually, I don't really think we've discussed the flat Earth that much tonight, you and I, Matrix, if at all. I don't really remember it coming up. So far, we're talking about satellites. Now, obviously, many flat earthers believe that satellites are fake, but even if you want to believe in spinning ball, you should still need some evidence to believe in satellites. So hopefully you can come along and we don't even have to talk about flat Earth, Press. We can completely avoid that topic altogether. Let's just talk about satellites because, like I said, you seem pretty confident that they exist and that to say otherwise is crazy. So you're welcome to come along. Or, if you like, you can just leave the chat and stop coming on to shows like this and spreading your nonsense, and you leave us alone and I'll leave you alone. So the ball's in your court, Press, and you do what you need to do. But Matrix, we need to wrap the show up soon, unless old mate joins us, in which case I would love to spend hours listening to all of his evidence for the satellites. I'm sure he's got plenty, so I can stay up late for that. But otherwise, we need to wrap it up soon. Did you want to talk about the scientific fairy tales today? That's the fourth topic. Or did you want to save that one for the next impromptu?
Yeah, well, I mean, perhaps, the show's been going on a couple of hours plus now, so maybe we can save that for another time. And I'd like to get into discussing evolution, Big Bang, and related scientific theories. But I think today, we've basically been discussing. We start off with looking at the New Horizon and Pluto, and then we've just been discussing gravity and associated theories related to NASA, and just looking at the NASA stuff mostly. So we've not really talked much about flat Earth, but these subjects are all interrelated. You can't have one without the other, and so that's what the discussion today's really been about.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, I just found out that our old friend Press, he's too busy to join us on the show because he's doing a video about the Iran nuclear deal. I forgot that these people still actually believe in all of the nuclear. They still believe in nuclear bombs and all of that. I forgot there's a lot of things that these guys believe in and they want you to be worried about. And no doubt that our old friend Press has a video for us about the nuclear deal with Iran, and maybe he's got more predictions for us about how something bad's got to happen. Don't listen to Alex Jones. All he does is push fear porn. No, listen to us, and we'll tell you about something big that's on the way. And hey, Jesus Christ. Anyway, really. Oh yeah. So I think it's been a good little impromptu chat here, mate. Look, the thing with gravity, I still want someone to explain to me how the axis can wobble, the precession of the equinoxes. For those who aren't aware, we talked about this on Sunday sessions. It's something that I've been thinking about lately. How can its axis wobble? It seems to me that any ball that's spinning, then it has an axis, and that axis, if moved and not acted upon by any force other than the gravity around it. I mean, let's just pretend gravity exists for a moment. Once it's spinning, if there's no other force acting on it, then the axis should only itself move along the circular path, a straight circle along the plane through the object. How could it move on a wobble? To me, it doesn't make any sense, and I'd like an explanation for this, because for me, this has been one of the biggest nonsenses of the story so far, of the whole heliocentric model. How on earth does it wobble? It doesn't make any sense to me. And I think this does relate to the topic of gravity. And we probably should have said at the start, Matrix, for anyone who's listening to this for the first time, they haven't really heard anyone speak the way that we're speaking about these topics. No one's saying that you falling back to Earth doesn't happen. You throw a pencil in the air, bang, it comes back to the table. No one's disagreeing with that. But the theory of gravity only came along 150 years ago, something like this, like the theory of gravity to explain the phenomenon. So no one disputes the phenomenon exists, that heavy things fall, that buoyancy is real. No one disputes that. What we're disputing is the mechanism by which it happens, and gravity was given to us as a catch-all explanation of how all of these objects rotate around these objects, and how come if you're on a spinning ball you don't fly off, and all these kinds of things. And it's nonsense. It's utter nonsense. And if you weren't trained to believe it from a young age, there's no way you'd believe it. The only reason why you believe it is because you were indoctrinated with it from a very young age, and you were also indoctrinated that anyone who doesn't agree with it is crazy, which is why most people today, they don't even know the difference between the phenomenon of falling and buoyancy and the explanation, which is the theory of gravity. They think they're the same thing. So it's like, what? You don't believe in gravity? Well, how come I fall back when I jump in the air? Well, humans have always known that if you jump in the air, you fall. They've always known that. They didn't need so-called scientists to tell them. The scientists came along and said, oh, the reason why that happens is the same reason why the objects in the sky are the way they are. Really? Sure. Why is that? Because you're on a spinning ball. Now, to you, the idea of living on a spinning ball makes sense because that's what you've always been told to believe. But I ask people a hypothetical. Suppose there was a 10-year-old child. He was raised very well. He was fed well. He was taught to read. He was taught maths. He was a happy young tacker. And then you were put in charge of teaching him that the Earth was a ball. But he'd never been taught anything about the Earth, being flat, ball, anything. He just has his senses, his eyes. He feels like he's lived his whole life perfectly fine. He's seen the moon and the sun rotate. He was never told that happened because he was on a ball. And then it's your job to convince him that he actually lives on a spinning ball. How much luck do you think you'd have? And how would you try and explain it to him? How would you try and do it? Serious question. Matrix, this is something I think about a lot. And like I've said to people, the most convincing thing for me about, because this is all about saying, okay, then there's no curvature, fair enough. The horizon rises to eye level, fair enough. The water going down the drains differently, different hemispheres, that's a myth, fair enough. Coriolis effect is a complete and utter myth, fair enough. The ship going over the horizon isn't really going over the horizon, it's just vanishing at the vanishing point, fair enough. All these things, right? But the hard problem for people to go, gee, I can't give away a spinning ball model is because there's still this underlying feeling of, but how could everyone be so wrong? I mean, people aren't that stupid. They're stupid enough to believe in Sandy Hook with 20 kids supposedly dying, even though there's no evidence that it did, and plenty of evidence that the whole thing was staged. People are dumb enough to believe that. They're dumb enough to believe that some guy with a turban controlled 19 people with box cutters, outsmarting the most sophisticated defense system that the recorded history knows, and flying 3 out of 4 missions successfully, 2 into the World Trade Center, 1 into the Pentagon, and 1 into a field somewhere. Like they're dumb enough to believe all of that, but surely they wouldn't be dumb enough to believe that they're on a spinning ball if they're not. All right then, test your theory. Just go and get the average person to explain to you why they believe they're on a spinning ball. And they will tell you things like water going down a drain or sticks and stones. You know, oh, well, sticks and shadows. Oh, well, you know, this guy measured with shadows and sticks the distance and, you know, he did some maths and da-da-da-da-da. It's like, okay, then show me the maths. I just know. What do you mean you just know? You're just trying to tell me we live on a spinning ball and your evidence is water going down drains and sticks and shadows? Yep. And then you come back to me and you tell me that people aren't dumb enough to be convinced that they're on a spinning ball when they're on nothing of the sort. Do it. Matrix, what say you?
Yep. The arguments, the top 10 arguments they like to use are just the weakest arguments. People haven't really thought about these things. Haven't done the research, the necessary research to see if there are arguments against these, top 10 proofs of the Earth being a sphere. Basing, what they look up in the sky, they see what they think have been told are spherical planets and so on, and they make the assumption that the Earth, should be a sphere as well. I mean, the arguments are just, I don't know. People have just got to look into the subject more. I mean, rather than rush to judgment on these things, and which appears to be the case with some people in the community at this point in time. And they're willing to mock people for simply questioning what we've been told by the authorities, by the NASA, the military-industrial complex, and they'd rather you not concern yourself with these issues, and you should pay more attention to the constant cycle of the disinformation that's put out by the media, week in, week out, and pay more attention to things like Miley Cyrus and Caitlyn Jenner, and bashing Alex Jones for saying what he says. These things are far more fundamentally important than where we exist and the bigger overall deception that might exist. You don't want to focus on that. You want to focus on these constant barrage of media hoaxes and use titles in your videos that suggest things are coming. You should be worried. You should sell off all your money. You should invest in gold, and you've got to start prepping. And the big disaster is around the corner and stuff like that. That's what they want you to focus on, rather than seeking the truth, which is a much, much bigger paradigm than just the media is lying to you. I mean, we know the media is lying. Yeah, I mean, they put out fake stories, and you're just saying they're fake, and that's all there is to it. And they want to keep you in that paradigm of thought, rather than looking at the bigger truths that exist and aspects of truth seeking. I mean, they go into every walk of life. Your health, philosophy, religions, science, all of it. It all comes. It's such a big subject matter, but they don't want you focusing on those things. They want you focusing on the, satanic Illuminati symbolism in a Rihanna video and things like that. Obviously that's way more important, and you should be worried about it.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I've noticed this myself, is that a lot of people, because we all get into this field of inquiry in our own ways, and a lot of people seem to come to this sort of part of the YouTube world because they discovered the banking things and the finance and monetary, that the money's all fake, and there's bound to be a collapse and blah blah blah, and they're truly waiting for the collapse. They've actually decided in their mind there's going to be a collapse, and now all they want to do is sort of look for the next piece of evidence that's going to happen. And I know this because I went through that phase myself, but it is just a phase. And then eventually you realize, hold on a second, if the people in charge are as powerful as I think they are, they would probably want me to be afraid. That probably helps them more than it helps me. And then you start looking a little bit more closely at these so-called alternative outlets like Zero Hedge or what have you. And yeah, there's plenty of good comments there at Zero Hedge, but the articles themselves are essentially just the mainstream. They're just the more scary version of the mainstream, a slightly more intelligent one because they deal with more facts and figures, but they're still pushing a mainstream narrative. And really, why would you want to spend your time constantly waiting for what is essentially the apocalypse? Why would you want to do that to yourself? How does it help you? Because I can see how it helps your enemies, and you should be able to see how it helps your enemies, but how does it help you? And then you start to think, well, gee, who are the people who are constantly pushing the fear, even in places like YouTube? Who are the people who are always saying, they always get death threats? I'm always getting death threats doing this work. I'll tell you right now, for some reason, I'm big enough that I've got a certain group of people making all of these fake accounts about me and all these fake videos about me and going into all the comment sections, constantly saying that I'm a shill, over and over again, clearly part of a strategy. But guess what? They're meant to be so-called truthers. Other than the so-called truthers, I've never had any bad blowback whatsoever. Not via private message, not via email, not even really in the comments underneath my own video. The only problems I've ever got are from this very same truthers who would try and tell you that if you do the work that they're doing, you're putting yourself in danger. Well, I'll tell you something right now. You're not in any danger. The worst that will happen to you is the so-called truthers, the truther mafia, as Lester calls them. They'll come for you, probably. They'll make some nasty accounts and say that you're a fag or whatever. That's the worst that'll happen. You're going to be fine. Stop being worried. There are people who want you to be worried. There are people who profit from you being worried. The person who benefits from you being worried isn't you. Never in a million years. And I'll give you an example here. they want to talk about Iran, right? As though Iran is real. All right, then. Well, why don't I screen share something? I know that we've got to wrap this up in the next 15 minutes or so, but let me screen share something with you guys. The Iranian Space Agency matrix. Were you aware that Iran had their own space agency?
I think I've heard of it before, yeah. But, it's not something I've really looked into.
Because, you know, a lot of these people want you to believe that Iran is actually separate, that their government isn't part of the overall agenda. And so that when there's things taking place between Iran and the United States, or the Iran and the UN or whatever, that it's actually real, because these ones aren't part of the same elite clique that's existed for a long time. Like, a lot of people know that the Bolshevik Revolution, which was run like 1917, it was controlled by the same people who by then already controlled the United States and France and these other countries. Many people know that, but it's like, oh, Iran and North Korea, you know, and Syria, they're not part of the whole thing. They're all completely separate. No, really, aren't they? Oh yeah, you know, Syria is very important strategically to Iran, because, you know, Iran is, oh yeah, okay, all right, I used to believe all of that. Well, let's look at the Iranian Space Agency, shall we? Because
But didn't the CIA create the coup in Iran, toppled and they installed Ayatollah Khomeini, right? If I'm not wrong. I mean, they've been involved in that process, the political process in Iran, for a long time. Like these other countries, like China as well, Chairman Mao and so on.
Look, I haven't looked back into the whole Iran, because here's the thing, I used to be really into geopolitics until I learned that it's all a big show, most of it anyway. And I think what happened is, back in the 50s, there was a guy called Mossadegh. I never pronounce his name correctly. It's like Mossadegh or something. And, you know, he wanted to nationalize the oil at the time, British Petroleum or whatever they were called back then. They didn't like it, so they ended up getting Mossadegh taken out, and that's how they ended up having whoever it was who came in after him. And then in 75, they had another revolution and something like that. But my understanding is it goes right back to the 50s, and a guy who tried to nationalize his assets getting taken out. Now that I can believe. I can believe that if someone comes along and says, actually, all of the wealth that you're plundering, that's going to be for my people, I can believe that that person might have been legitimate, and that him getting taken out might have been real. But what I do not believe is that the Iranians are actually distinct. The people who run the Iranians are distinct from the rest of the world, when they're trying to pass off that they have their own space agency. Can you see this? Have my screen sharing this all right?
Yeah, I can see it, yeah.
The Iranian Space Agency, Sazman-e-Fazeh Iran, I pronounced that terribly, I'm sure, is Iran's government space agency. Iran is an active participant in the Asian space race and became an orbital launch-capable nation in 2009. That'll be an interesting list. Let's check out who's on that. Iran is one of the 24 founding members of the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, which was set up in 58. There you go. Yeah, all right. So the timeline. Oh, who else is on this timeline? Oh, there's Sputnik. Oh, yeah, sure. Give me a break. Look at this. Confirmed orbital launch capable country. Confirmed orbital launch capable intergovernmental organization. Orbital launch project in development. Really? Australia has an orbital launch project in development? It wouldn't surprise me the way that we waste money on things. I mean, and people are like, Jono, are you saying that all of these countries are in on it? Yes, that's what I'm saying, you idiots. What, you actually think the Cold War was real? You still believe that? If you believe the Cold War was real, then you haven't actually done any research into any of this. And I hate to be the one to burst your bubble, but the Cold War was one gigantic scam. You need to go and study what the Bolshevik Revolution was. You need to understand who was behind that. You need to understand where they got their funding. You need to understand that the same people behind them were behind many other things going on in the world, and that the whole thing was one elaborate scam, got a lot of money from a lot of people, kept a lot of people very scared, which is exactly what the government wants, going back to what I said earlier. And the whole thing was a charade. Now, anyone who wants to tell you that it was all real or profit from you believing that it's all real, well, they're carrying out a charade. And I know that a lot of people don't like it when someone like me comes along and says, hey, have you questioned nukes? Hey, have you questioned the Cold War? Your instant reaction shouldn't be, well, I believe in nukes or I believe in the Cold War, so I'm going to attack you, Jono. your instant reaction, I would prefer, or you'd be better off this as well, is to say, well, Jono's probably wrong, but I'm going to go and prove it. I'm going to go and find the information to prove that the Cold War was real. I'm going to look at both sides and weigh it up for myself. And I think a lot of people, they feel insulted when someone like me says you're wrong. And look, maybe I could be nicer and say, hey, but I think if you look at the number of shows that I've done, I have, for the most part, been relatively pleasant in sharing some of the information that I think that I have access to. Yes, I will mock people from time to time. And yes, sometimes people's feelings will get hurt. But if you're going to say, well, you hurt my feelings, so now I'm just going to attack you instead of doing my own truth, search for the truth, okay, just don't try and pretend to me that your actual primary objective here is to find the truth. Your primary objective is something to do with ego or something to do with vendettas. Go for it if that's what you want to do. But if you're actually here for the truth and you didn't know until I just said it that the Cold War was fake and that nukes were fake as well, then go and do the research and prove that they're real. I'll change my mind, by the way. I would love to believe that Iran is actually a resistance to the New World Order. I'd love to believe that Syria is a genuine resistance to the New World Order. I'd love to believe that there are these objects that we can just send out there into space and they can just sit there and never fall down. And this would all be great. I could go back to focusing on all the other things that I used to focus on. But I'm going to need some actual evidence from you guys, and it better be better than the crap that Mythbusters give us or some of the other nonsense that I've seen that we've looked at today. You'd want to have some actual evidence instead of just belief systems. Matrix, what say you?
Yeah, well, the Cold War is kind of a similar creation as the space race between Russia and the United States, I think. We're interested to see what this thing about Iranian Space Agency. I mean, it seems a bit, they like to talk about their nuclear program and so on. It's a bit like, it reminds me of North Korea. Perhaps they're going to start up a space agency soon and become members of the UN.
Look at this, mate. They've got space centers, a space test laboratory. And that's how you know it's real. They're using the word laboratory. Now all we need is dudes with goggles and screwdrivers fixing lasers, and then we'll know 100% this has to be real. It's the next best thing to going into the moon yourself. Manned space program. Ah, boy. It's just,
Maybe they can send someone to the moon,
Wait, I know we have to wrap the show up soon, but let's look. I've never looked for this myself. Let's see what happens if we look for Iranian Space Agency footage. I've never looked into this, so this is going to be a lot of fun. What happens when we YouTube Iranian Space Agency? Is there anything here that looks legitimate? Come on, there's got to be something legitimate in here. Let's have a look. Iranian Space Agency. Oh, it's placed something into orbit. Islamic resistance movement from 5 months ago. Let's take a look. I do apologise if you're listening on mp3. Right now we're watching what appears to be a very long rocket shooting into space.
Allahu Akbar.
A lot of guys saying Allahu Akbar in the background. They're very happy about all this, apparently. So up it goes. It's a 1 minute video. We're into 45 seconds. Up and up it goes. And still going. Hasn't started curving around to fall into the ocean like they do in America. And there you go. That's it. That's your Iranian Space Agency. And I think they have a budget of $70 million. I think I read. What does it say here? What's their budget? $71 million US for 2014-15. Now, look, I imagine Iran's economy isn't quite as great as the Americans. So $71 million. That's a lot of money. And when people are like, oh, why would they fake all of these space missions? Well, there's a number of reasons. But one of the obvious ones is money. You need the people to buy into your nonsense. And one of the ways to get them to buy into it is like, oh, we're going to space. Ooh, what a load of nonsense. Let's see one other one. There's got to be something. Give me something from space. What's this? Let's have a look. Launch of a satellite. Matrix, what do you make of all of this?
Yeah, I'm convinced now. I mean, I didn't need to see it go into space. I didn't need to see anything longer than a minute-long clip. rockets, yeah, they're really effective, and it's amazing how they put the satellites perfectly in position and can maneuver them in the vacuum of space. It's just it's an awesome technology they've got. You know, I don't need to see it, but it's convincing.
Oh, look, it's a big object with light coming out the back, traveling really fast. I mean, that's proof that there are thousands of satellites up in space, isn't it? I mean, between this footage and the NASA footage, this really should be case closed, I would have thought.
Yeah, well, it seems like they don't have the budget that NASA has to, you know, produce composite images and CGI. So, I mean, you know, you can't blame them for that.
But, you know, look at this, you know. And by the way, is it possible that they've got these huge rockets that shoot exhaust out the back and fly through the sky? I think that's possible. I mean, I think this whole video could be fake, but even if there is these rockets, which I think they very well could be, that is cool. I'm not trying to take away from how cool it is that they've got these rockets that travel high in the sky at really fast speeds, and it must be hard to get them to balance when you get them to take off the Earth. I mean, just like, I think it's kind of amazing that they can get rockets to shoot through the sky like that. You know, like that's an amazing achievement enough. Why do you have to then go and pretend that they're then flying into some place where there's no falling back to the Earth? You know what I mean? Like, why can't you just be happy? Look at this. Up it goes. I reckon it'd be very hard to balance it. And like, look, you know, that's impressive. Like, it's a complete waste of money. Don't get me wrong, but at least it's an achievement. But they then have to go and carry on. It's like, oh, and not only did we do that, but it shot all the way out into a place where it didn't fall back to Earth. Really? Yep. And they had a man on it. A man on it. Yep. And the man and the women, they just floated around in space. Floated around. Yeah, there's this thing out there. They just live there for like a year. They can live there for a year. Yeah. What are they? Oh, they've got special tubes for their poo and their wee, and they sing songs up there, and oh yeah, it's a lot of fun up there. Really? Oh yeah. And this is your evidence? Is something shooting to the sky? Yep. All right. Okay. Oh, but Iran is yes, they're not part of the. I mean, for Christ's sakes, this is just so ridiculous, man.
You should be scared, man. You should be worried that Iran are putting satellites up in space. They can see it. You know, they will be able to see all the military operations that are going on against them and so on. So, I mean, it's a big concern.
It's just wow. I mean, we're up to Matrix. We have to wrap the show up soon, but we're up to how's this? We'll wrap it up within 10 minutes, and it's a 3-hour show. And I haven't been able to read the live comments for the last little bit, but I want to say to everyone, you know, Matrix and I, we get together, we say, hey, up for a live chat today? Sure, why not? Let's do a live show. To get more than 40 of you out to watch it, I do appreciate it. And I know that many of you have been convinced by certain people that I'm not to be listened to, and that's fine if you don't want to listen to me. All I ask is that you go and do your own research and think for yourself. And I think that if more people do that, they'll find themselves wondering, hold on, why were the Truth and Mafia attacking him when all he was doing was encouraging us to do our own research? And why is there a group who say that you shouldn't do your own research? To even question the official story damages the truth movement. I mean, I think a lot of people are starting to wake up to all of this. Matrix, what say you?
Well, I think certain elements of the community are damaging the truth movement. They are dividing people, they're ridiculing people for questioning things, and willing to explore subjects like NASA and whether NASA's real or not, the shape of the Earth, and, you know, questioning all of science. And you know, for me, these people are, you know, being very destructive, and you know, they're not bringing any, not promoting any. No, not really showing any evidence or proof to support their claims. It's a lot of speculation and creating infighting and division. I mean, I think there's no more destructive force in the truth community at this point in time than what I'm seeing on We'll Do It Live, and the people there and how they're going about doing what they're doing. I mean, I think that's the reality of the matter, and for some reason they're targeting people who are questioning things and you know, thinking outside of the hoax-busting paradigm, you know, and it's a bit sad. It's interesting to see. It's fascinating to watch on some level, but it's. I think that's the way I see things are happening right now.
Well, you know, in the live chat, what have we got now? More than 40 watching. An old friend of mine, Rorschach, he says, remember, guys, John LeBon is on the fence. Just keep that in mind when viewing and listening. Well, I'm not on the fence when it comes to the fake space stuff, Rorschach, and I've never suggested otherwise. You look at this footage for yourself, you make up your own mind. Now, if you're referring to the whole flat Earth debate, I would suggest to you guys, all of the peanut gallery and all of the lemon and lime crew, I have put a better objection to the leading flat earthers than any of you have, because you sit there on the sidelines like the peanuts you are, and you throw the peanuts because you're in the peanut gallery, and you attack me. Well, guess what? I put a difficult question to Eric Dubay on our show Bald Earth Skeptic, episode 5 a few days ago. I said to him, I've got footage that I took myself in Brisbane of the sky at sunset and what appears to me to be the clouds being more illuminated at the bottom than at the top. And unfortunately, I couldn't screen share the footage to show him, but I've got it and I'll upload it soon to my channel. And I said to him, I know you can't see the footage, but if I could show you footage of the clouds being illuminated from below, how would you explain that on your flat model? Because on the flat model, they think the sun is, or not all flat earthers are the same. Dubay would say that the sun is about 3,000 miles above the earth, because the whole sticks and shadows nonsense that they use for the ball actually makes more sense on the flat, and it would point to about 3,000 miles. And you'd know this if you did your own research, which very few of you ever do, because it's beyond you. But if you did your own research, you'd know that that's a flat earth model's explanation. And I said to him, on your model, the sun has to be above the clouds. So how could the clouds be brighter on the bottom of the cloud than on the top? And I thought his answer was not very convincing at all. Now, I'll have to go away, upload this video for myself, read more of Dubay's forum, because maybe he has a better explanation on his forum than he did on the spot. I'm not just going to say, well, he couldn't answer why the clouds are... And by the way, the implication of my question is it would make more sense. This is one of the very few things that would make more sense on the ball than on the flat. That's the implication of my question, obviously. Now, what I have to do is go away, do more research, see if I can find a good answer from the flat earthers to this, because maybe Eric just wasn't prepared for the question. I mean, instead of, because there's a lot of people out there, they're like, I'm going to keep asking all these questions and attacking the model I don't like. And as soon as I don't get a good answer, aha, I've proven that my model's good. Well, firstly, that's a false dichotomy. That's just nonsense. But secondly, you're doing yourself a disservice. Give yourself a chance to get your head around the explanations that are given. Go to ifs.boards.net, give yourself a chance. So I can't sit here and say that I've debunked the flat earth model just from asking Dubay that question, but I put to you guys out there, the ones throwing the peanuts, that I've done a better job of debunking the flat earth than any of you have. And yet you want to sit there and take pot shots at me because your great selfless leader has told you guys that I'm the bad guy. Even though I've said to you guys a million times, I've got no beef with any of you. If you don't like my shows, you don't have to listen. If you don't enjoy my shows, I don't want you to listen. I want you guys to enjoy your lives. I want you to enjoy your own path. If your path involves research, great, because that's what mine involves. Hopefully we can collaborate like Matrix and I do. If your path doesn't involve research, it just involves petty arguments and bitter arguments, guess what? There's heaps of so-called truthers out there who'll provide that for you endlessly. Constant infighting, constant bickering, constant this, constant that. And I know that some of you are going to instantly say, oh, but John, didn't you the other day on your Sunday sessions show the video that Jeff made of you? Yeah, I did. That was the first time that I've explained to people what really happened back then in months. Since that whole plane debacle, I've been getting on with making my videos, doing my research, and here I am today. But finally, enough was enough. I said, let's go back and look at what actually happened. And I did spend a lot of time on one show doing that. But most of my shows don't get involved with any of that nonsense, because that nonsense is a distraction and a waste of time. And my question to you out there is, if there's somebody out there saying that you have to believe what they believe or you're hurting the community, that anyone who does question what they believe is a paid shill to distract you, and then spends the rest of their time trolling people like me instead of making videos about the truth, why the hell would you think that they're on your side? Why would you do that? What the hell could be wrong with you to actually believe in that crap? People like me are simply here to do our own research, to try and get our heads around what's really going on. Because I've never pretended to any of you that I know exactly what's going on. No way. 6 months ago, I thought satellites were real. In fact, if you go back and listen to the ARP episode 5 or 6, one of the really early ones, maybe even back when there was just me and Ethan, maybe episode 2 and 3, I can't remember. I did a big feature piece on what was happening with Russia and the EU and all the rest of it, and there was that phone call, and I forget all the names now, because like I said, I don't really bother with geopolitics anymore, but you remember what I'm talking about. There was this thing, and it's like, fuck the EU, and I was looking at the old colour revolutions and all of this, because back then I still believed that there was a good chance that Russia was legitimately different to the rest of the world. I still believed that back then. Now, I gave the caveat at the time, I'm not too sure, so I'm going to go with what we know and then try and come to a conclusion based on that. But even back then, I still believed it was kind of possible. I thought it was very possible that Russia was the real deal. Turns out now, to me, no, that's just a silly thought. I could be wrong, by the way. I could be convinced. Give me some evidence. Right now, it seems silly to me. So you see, even from the start, I've said, I don't really know. And over the time that I've been doing this show, my own views have developed. Have your views been developing? Because there's a certain group of people, all they want you to know is that there are certain stories in the news that are fake. This shooting's fake. That shooting's fake. That shooting's fake. They don't want you to know that there were no planes on 9/11. They don't want you to know about the holocaust. And they don't want you to know about the nuke hoax. They want you to actually believe that NASA's real. Can you believe that? They want you to believe all of that. So if you listen to them, you'll be taking no journey. You'll be staying right where you want them in this nice little gate, because that's what they're doing. They're keeping a gate, and they're attacking people like me who say, it was fun in your pen for a while, guys, but I'm off to do my own research. Oh, no, you can't do that. Now we're coming after. We're going to make videos about you. We're going to make fake accounts about you. Everything that you do is going to be heavily scrutinized. We'll call you a fag at every opportunity. We'll call you a shill. And if you dare so much as pop up in a Melbourne newspaper, in a Vox Pop section, we're going to try and use that as evidence against you. I mean, you guys are fucking kidding me. I mean, seriously, if you're listening to this right now and you still believe that other group are on your side, then don't listen to my shows anymore, please. I ask just one favor of you: don't listen to my shows. Go and do something else with your life, because there's no point in you listening to me. There's no hope for you, as far as I'm concerned. So long as you let your mind be controlled like that by other people who tell you what to think, don't listen to people like me. It can't help you. All it's going to do is get you angry, because they've put little triggers in your mind so you do get angry. I don't want you to get angry. I want you to get upset. I wish you well. I wish you love. I wish you peace. I wish you happiness. You know, the kind of happiness that I had when I was down in Melbourne over the last 5 days, hanging out with people who I only met through doing stuff like this. That actually happened to me. I mean, how many of you people have actually met people in real life through doing this kind of work online? Because I have. Had a great time. Sunday night was one of the best nights of the year for me. I'll look back at that one in years to come and say, wow, what a ton of fun that was. Got to hang out with Adam Bravo, got to hang out with Gino, got to hang out with some of their mates who I'd never heard before. We had a good chat. For hours, we got to just sit there and chat about whatever we wanted to. No one got upset. No one got offended. No one called us crazy. Do you have that in your life? Because if you don't, you can go and get it, but you won't get it by sitting there throwing peanuts at people like me. You'll get it by going out there, doing your own research, being polite to people, being nice to people, finding people with common interests and working together, rather than trying to attack each other. Because there are people who do want you to attack each other. Why would you do what they want you to do? If they want you to be angry and cause troubles, can't you see what they're trying to do? Have a think. Think about it. Seriously. Now, Matrix, I'm sorry that we went a little bit over the 3 hours there, mate. That was my fault. I went on a little bit of a ramble there, but do you want to give us any of your thoughts based on the last 10 minutes of me and my stream of consciousness, and then final thoughts for the episode, because we need to wrap it up soon?
Yeah, I think you covered it pretty well there. I mean, pointing out some of the problems that the things that have been going on recently. Yeah, it's been a good show, man. 3 hours went a bit longer than we thought, but yeah, man, it's another good one. I think some good points discussed, and yeah, look forward to the next one.
Yeah, well, I should apologise. That was very, what's the word? What do you call it when you hog stuff? What's the word? You know when someone hogs things? What do you call it? That kind of person. Selfish. That was very selfish of me just then, Matrix. I do apologise, mate. I went off on a little tangent. I do that sometimes. If you tuned in late, I recommend you go back to the start of the show. We covered the New Horizon passage of Pluto, which is supposed to happen tonight. Yeah, good luck to you. We covered the moon laser reflection nonsense and looked at people like, who do we look at? The Mythbusters, the Flat Earth debunkers, all that nonsense. And we looked at gravity, just a few of the questions we've got about gravity. And I guess next time, Matrix, we'll have to talk about the big scientific fairy tales like the Big Bang Theory, dinosaurs, and human evolution. And what people can do in between now and then is to do their own research. So, Matrix, are there any places where you would recommend people go if they're actually interested in doing research to get more information? Any videos, any channels you want to recommend for those people? And it might be a minority of the so-called truth community, but for those people who actually do want to go and find stuff out, where would you recommend they go and look?
Well, I mean, a big part of the research I did on evolution was looking at the Christian argument, the creationist point of view, and someone I came across was Kent Hovind, and he has maybe 20, 30 debates with evolutionists and evolutionary biologists and so on, and they're about 2 hours long, each one, and I've watched pretty much most of them, and his arguments are just excellent. I mean, and the evolutionists seem to have very, very flimsy theoretical, hypothetical evidence to support their theory. And I recommend people go check out Kent Hovind debates with evolutionists for a start. I mean, I think we might bring up a lot of the points he addresses next time we speak about this subject. That's where I would point people.
Cool, man. Well, look, I know it's a little bit sidetracked from what we talked about tonight, but the documentary September Clues by Simon Shack, you have to understand how easy it is for the people who run the show to fake things. And 9/11 is a classic example of them doing that. So you need to go and get your hands on a copy of September Clues by Simon Shack. It's on YouTube for free. Simon Shack, September Clues, I think it's 90 minutes. And it shows you how easily people, and this includes me and it includes you, can be fooled into believing that we saw something that we didn't see. And once you understand how easy it is for them to do that, then maybe you'll start to get your head around the possibility that there are people, even on YouTube, trying to stop you from understanding certain things. And then maybe you'll start to get your head around the notion that people really can be fooled on a mass scale, including with things like satellites. So I highly recommend you go and check out September Clues by Simon Shack. And of course, as with everything, do your own research as well. Be skeptical of Simon Shack. Be skeptical of everyone. Be skeptical, people. And skeptical isn't just saying, I don't believe you, so I'm going to attack you. That's not being skeptical. That's being cynical or bitter or whatever, but dogmatic. Being skeptical is saying, I'm going to go and find the evidence, look at the evidence presented by the different people, make up my own. That's being skeptical actually involves going and looking at the evidence for yourself. So if you go to a place like ifas.boards.net, if you don't understand an explanation for something at first, don't say, well, I don't understand it, so it's wrong. Give yourself some time to think about it. There's been a number of things that have taken me time to think about, and that's why I'm at the point where I'm at now, where I say, yeah, spinning ball model, there's just so much wrong with it, you know? But the flat earth model, I'm finding my own problems with that as well. And you can too. Don't just listen to other people telling you what you can and can't believe. Believe whatever you want to believe, but if you're not going to base it on evidence, don't expect to be taken seriously by people like me. That's enough from me. Thanks, Matrix, for joining me, mate. I really enjoy these chats. The time goes quick, man. If the listeners knew how much time people like you and me spent chatting on Skype about these things, it'd blow them away, actually. I make what I think is a discovery. I'm like, Matrix, what do you think about this? And you're like, oh, no, because actually the official story. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess I do. Okay, I'll work on, you know what I mean? This is what it's meant to be about, collaboration. We've got this amazing the internet, collaborate with people. And instead of using it to collaborate, we're using it to tear each other down. What a load of nonsense. But anyway, thanks for listening. We've had more than 30 for the entire show. We've got almost 50 now. And if you are listening back on delay, either on mp3 or YouTube, like I always say, I appreciate you giving me the time. I appreciate you listening. I hope you get something out of it. And if you do, it's been totally worth it for you. I know it's definitely been totally worth it for me. And, of course, I'll be back tomorrow, at this time tomorrow, Wednesday time, 10 p.m. Brisbane, 8 a.m. New York tomorrow my time, obviously. It's Tuesday here. So Wednesday, 8 a.m. New York, 10 p.m. Brisbane will be the Baller Skeptic Roundtable, episode 6. And this week we've got on with us Jeranism, actually. So that'll be a lot of fun. I'll be there. Matrix will be there. And the rest of the crew will be there. We'll see you then. But for now, take care of yourselves. Be good to each other. Be skeptical and question everything.